And while we're hitting record right now, I am putting a link in the chat. And that is the link to our very own YouTube channel. So if you guys grab that link, you can either click on it or copy and paste, either one. Please remember to rename yourselves, first and last name, and whatever you want me to call you in parentheses. So yeah, this is our YouTube channel. So every class we're recording. And at the end of each class, I'll put the recording for today's class in that channel. So as we go on, that channel is going to grow. So my suggestion is you guys go ahead and get it now and either subscribe to it or bookmark it, save it. You know, maybe you don't need it in unit 2, but maybe when we get to unit 7, for example, you might say, oh my gosh, I need to go through that class again. You guys with me? So you may be thinking, oh, I'm fine, I don't need it now. Please just go ahead and grab it now, because we're getting into some more difficult stuff in the next couple weeks. Did anybody not get it? Anybody not see the link? Just put it in again in case you're just joining us. You can't hear. That's really strange. You can't hear me, but you could hear me the other day. You may need to get with Jane. Of course, if you can't hear me, then this is irrelevant. Okay. So if you're just joining us, I've already taken attendance. So if you're just joining us, you need to let me know you're here. If you're ever late, if you ever miss attendance, you need to let me know that you're in. So I can give you credit for being here. So again, I've already taken attendance. We just put the link for the YouTube channel in the chat. Anybody not get it? Welcome. Remember, we try to start right at 9. We still got some people coming in. Okay, so YouTube channel, again, and guys understand. So okay, after class, Zoom has to process the recording. And then I get the download from Zoom, and then I got to upload it to YouTube. So an upload is different than download, right? So you're not going to have it immediately after class. Please don't call me at 1:15 and say, where's the recording from today? It just takes time to process on my end. For the most part, I'll say you'll have this class's recording by the time you're finishing dinner tonight, if not sooner, but at the absolute latest by the time you're finishing dinner. Okay, so just give it time to process. So the first class is already in the channel. So if you want to go back and review the welcome, or if you want to go back and refresh unit 1 or anything we've covered so far in unit 2. A couple of you, I think I need to get you to rename yourselves, please. First and last name. And then if you want me to call you something else. Part of this is for me while I'm getting ready to know you guys, but another part of this is in case the Real Estate Commission ever summons my records, I'll be able to vouch for you that you were here. In real estate, we document everything. Why don't you guys go ahead and write that down? Document everything. We're going to talk more about that within the next couple weeks. All right, so YouTube channel, let me put it in one more time just for those of you that just joining us. Again, if you're just joining us, tell me hi so we can give you credit. Okay, so YouTube channels, you can click on it, copy and paste. And again, just either subscribe to it or bookmark it so you have it for future references. Okay. All right, that's that. Let's all, before we actually get started, pick back up where we left off. Let's look in our books and let's all look at page 17. And as promised, I want to spend just a few minutes and kind of going over some things that may help you guys interpret some of these test questions. Now, unit 1 is pretty simple. The end of course exam or the end of unit quiz is pretty simple. Unit 1 is pretty simple, right? As we go further, things are going to get more difficult. These end of unit quiz questions are going to get bigger and longer. So we're starting, very basic and building ourselves up. First off, one thing that they really like to do to you guys with test questions is put distractors in the question. And what's a distractor's job? To distract you. It's meant to deter you from the question. So step 1 is you guys need to really understand and really focus on what is the question asking me? Again, right now I'm looking at these, they're 1 sentence, 2 sentences long. That's nothing, we get this. But when they start turning into a whole paragraph and they give you a scenario and there's a whole bunch of information in there, there's going to be information that you don't need. So how do you rule out the distractors? You just focus on what the question's asking you. If there's information not related to the stem of the question, then that's a distractor. Don't let the distractor win. So let's look, for example, let's talk about how we can break some of these questions down. So on page 17, let's look at number 7. Here's the good news. All the questions on both of your exams, both mine and your state exam, everything is multiple choice. Everything. A, B, C, or D. There is no fill in the blank. There's no essay. There's no true or false. Everything is multiple choice. There's the good news, which means the answer's looking at you, right? A, B, C, or D. Most of the time, you can read the answer choices. Most of the times, you can rule one out pretty quickly. One is just so off, so obscure that you can go ahead and do away with that. Now you're down to 3. Maybe you can rule out another one. Now you're down to 2. It's an elimination process, right? If you were just to guess A, B, C, or D, you got a 25% chance of getting it right. You rule one out, now you're up to 33%. You rule another one out, now you're up to 50%. Where are my Vegas people? You know how your odds work, right? So the higher the odds, the better your chance of getting the question right, right? So if you can rule out one, great. When you guys read these test questions, my suggestion is to treat each answer independently. So in other words, read the question and then read A. Read the question and read B. Read the question and read C. See how each answer relates to the question. What is the problem asking you? Ultimately, what are you trying to find? And you should be able to go through A, B, C, and D and label them true or false. So if you treat each one independently, you just label A true or false, B true or false, C. By the end, you should have 3 trues and 1 false, or 3 falses and 1 true. So you're looking for the odd man out here, right? If 3 trues and 1 false, your right answer is probably the false. If you have 2 trues and 2 falses, then you need to dissect it a little further, go a little deeper. Well, let's look at number 7. A theater or hotel would be classified under the real estate category of residential. Stop and ask yourself, is residential, would that be a theater or hotel? No, I would call that false. Look at it again. A theater or hotel would be classified under the real estate category of commercial. I kind of like that answer. Maybe it is, I do think it's a good answer, but maybe there's another answer, another good answer. Guys, keep in mind, you're looking for the best answer. You may have another good answer, but you're looking for the best one. So far I like B, but I'm going to look at C and D too, just to make sure that B is the best. You guys see what we're doing here? We're really dissecting these questions. A theater hotel would be classified under the category of agricultural. No, I don't think we can go through theaters and hotels in the farm somewhere. So I would call that false. And then lastly, a theater or hotel will be classified under the category of industrial. No, I don't think we're producing them in a warehouse. So I got A is false, B is true, C is false, D is false. So what's my right answer? B. I really dissected that problem. and I treated each answer independently. I studied the answer as it relates to this question. Every single word in the problem, every single word in the answer means something. And one word can change the whole question or the whole answer. Remember Tuesday, we looked at your absolute words, things like, what were some examples? We looked at like must and always and never, right? Those are pretty deep words, right? When you see those absolute words, then you know there's no wiggle room to must. Must is must. So a question came in. Is there only one right answer? Yes, there's only one. There's one best answer. There's one that could be close, but maybe it's one word that changes the whole thing. Can there be two correct answers? No. There's only one right answer. One's better than all the others. What is that I heard once? You're looking for the least wrong answer. When you're dissecting this, you're looking for the least wrong one. And again, I mean, okay, unit 1, I know this is kind of, but trust me when I say it gets more difficult from here. The other type of question you may encounter, for example, is like number 9 on page 17. Number 9 has Roman numerals. Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, and then A, B, C, or D. Y'all, I used to hate these questions, and I hate the word hate, but I used to hate these questions until somebody explained to me how to read them. And I'm like, oh, that's not so bad. Again, treat Roman numeral 1 and Roman numeral 2 independent. Treat them separately. So number 9 says a designation realtor refers to any licensed real estate broker. Do your head one way or the other. Is Roman numeral 1 right or wrong? Yes or no? Is Roman numeral 1 right or wrong? So I'm seeing no's. Roman numeral 1 is false. Realtor is not a broker. So right out the gate, I can eliminate A and C. Everybody see what I'm saying? Because I already determined that Roman numeral 1 is false. So off the bat, I just went from a 25% chance to a 50% chance. So now look at Roman numeral 2. The designation realtor refers to an active member of the National Association of Realtors. Is that true or false? And that is, I see heads bobbing now. So that is true. So what's our answer for number 9? B. You see what we're doing? We're really dissecting these questions. We're really spending time looking at these questions. Both of your exams are timed, and I'll talk about that as we go. I think one thing you guys can really do to prepare for your exams is to start working with a clock. When you take these questions at the end of the unit, pretend like this is a real test. When you do quizzes and learn, test, pass, pretend like it's a real test. Pretend like you're really taking, and that's going to alleviate some of the stress. I know several of you have expressed concern about test taking, and I totally get it. But if you start working with a clock now, I would say on average, you can plan to spend about 2 minutes per question. So if you're doing the quiz at the end of unit 1, for example, that's a 20 question quiz. So if you take 20 times 2, you get 40 minutes. Set the clock on your phone for 40 minutes and take unit 1 quiz. If you blow through it in 10 minutes and you failed it, maybe you can slow down a little bit. If you didn't get through it in 40 minutes, you need to speed up a little bit. You guys see what I'm saying? Start working now with a clock so you know how much time you have to allow for your end of class exam and your state exam. You know what I hear a lot from you guys? Oh, I knew that. I just read it too fast. Or I knew that. I just glanced over it. I got in a hurry. You know what my response to you is? Slow down. How do you know how much time to spend on it? Start working with a clock now. So question came in about number 9. So remember what we said. I always got to make sure I say this right. Getting your license makes you a broker. Take that a step further and you become a realtor. How do you become a realtor? You join the National Association of Realtors. Just because you're a broker doesn't mean you're a realtor. All realtors are brokers. Not all brokers are realtors. So just because you have a real estate license, it is one step towards becoming a realtor. But once you become a broker, it's not automatic. It's just one step closer. Have you guys started looking at some of these end of unit quizzes? I know we've only finished 1 unit. We're going to finish unit 2 today. Get started in unit 3. We can look at that. Tim, I'll come back to that. Yep. Let me look at that. So Jolie, thank you for saying that. Guess what? Things start getting tricky in unit 2, unit 3. This is why I'm begging you guys to commit now, to start studying now, to start focusing now. And Tim, I'll look at that during break. Okay. Math, yeah, we start doing math in unit 3. Okay. So that's that. Hope that helps. Dissecting, working to a clock. In just a bit, we're going to do kind of a little math introduction. And hopefully, not hopefully, but at that time, I'll be able to show you how you can grade yourself. A question came in, are there areas in the book we should not spend a lot of time on? Yeah, I don't cover everything in the book. Remember, what do we follow? We follow the syllabus. So if it's not in the syllabus, the Real Estate Commission says if we cover everything in the syllabus, we'll cover everything that you may see on your state exam. Okay, so do I cover every single thing in the book? No, I follow the syllabus. Let's see, homework, selfie with textbook with introduction. I've heard from a good chunk of you. So for those of you that I've met, hi again. It's good to see you. If you haven't sent me your textbook, your selfie introduction with your textbook, please do so this weekend or whenever you get your book. You should be getting your book soon from Lane, but just don't forget to do that. Don't do it now in class. That's a distraction. Make yourself a note to do it. And if you send it and I didn't get back to you, that means I didn't get it. I will always respond. So if you sent it and you haven't heard back from me yet, then for some reason I didn't get it. And I did just check my spam this morning and I actually found one of you in my spam. So I'm glad I looked. Why don't you guys remind me, let's just do a quick refresher from Tuesday, make sure we're all on the same page. Why don't you guys remind everyone in the chat, you can set your chat to everyone. How many allowable hours are you allowed to miss? How many hours are you allowed to miss? Dang, Mindy was waiting on me. Do you know that was coming? 6870179. Yes, that's my number. Yeah, 15 is the max. 15 is the most. And guys, I'm telling you, if you're missing 14, 13, you're missing a lot. So please make sure you just try to have your absences for emergency only. Please try to plan to be here as much as you can. I can't tell you how many times it happens. We get to the week of the exam, somebody goes over their time, they go through the entire class and then go over their time and an emergency happens and they have to miss. And this isn't my rule. This isn't Lane's rule. This is the Real Estate Commission's rule. There's nothing I can do about this. Are there any allowable absences? Are there any allowable excusable absences? Everybody shake your head no. If you're not here, I can't give you credit for being here. There are no excusable absences. Okay, this is usually not a problem on day 1, day 2. It is a problem on week 8. So let's all agree not to run into that problem. I hope you guys have been working on securing a distraction-free zone for class. Having yourself in a quiet place, no distraction. TV's off. Yes. All other internet browsers are closed. Yes. Remember, when we're here, we're here. Just because I can see you on camera doesn't mean you're here paying attention and listening. So 0 distractions. Look at me checking off stuff. I like check marks. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. And before we really get started, before we pick up, I want to go back. I very rarely go back. But day 1, I was looking at our chat, and I just want to clarify something. If I ever see the need to clarify something, then I'll take a few minutes. I don't want there to be any confusion. So remember on Tuesday, you guys have already seen this, so you don't have to worry about writing it down. Remember on Tuesday, we were talking about trade fixtures. And in going back and looking at our chat, I noticed something that I refer to as the what if trail. What if this? What if that? What if, what if, what if? What if's cousin is what about? Well, what about this? What about that? And what concerns me about that is when we start going down the what if and the what about trail, we're getting away from the main point. We're getting away from the big picture. So I just want to take a minute and make sure we're all good on trade fixtures. A trade fixture, if a tenant brings it in, if a commercial tenant brings it in to a property for them to conduct their trade, it's considered a trade fixture. Well, what if this? Well, what about that? Is the tenant bringing it in to conduct their business? And if that answer is yes, then it's considered a trade fixture. Be very, very careful about the what if trail, the what about hole. It's like Alice in Wonderland. You jump down that rabbit trail, that rabbit hole, and you can keep going, right? It's so important that we stay focused on the question, on the topic. You guys have a lot of questions, which I think we've already learned. I don't have all the answers to your questions. I don't have all the answers to your questions. What do I know? I know what you need to know for your test. So that's going to be our focus. It's so important that we learn early to stay focused. The only time it'll come real property to the landlord is if the tenant leaves it. So at the end of the lease, if the tenant doesn't take their personal property with them, then it becomes real property of the landlord. Everybody good with that? As soon as you start asking, as soon as you find yourself going, well, what if this? And what about that? Just stop for a second and ask, am I getting off topic? Am I getting off point here? Keep you guys on the right track. So if it causes damage when they remove it, then the tenant has to fix it. If the tenant removes it at the end of their lease, then they fix the damage. The damage to the property it makes. Okay, is that good? I'm here to help. I want to squash bad habits before they start. Okay. So let's fast forward. We were talking about estates when we left off. When we were talking about different types of estates. Why don't you guys remind me in the chat? You're getting ready to see it. Don't. What's one word that can be used to describe an estate? One word in the chat. Just one word. When I say estate, what's one word that we should think of? Just one. Okay. So an estate, when you see the word estate, an estate is just an interest. An estate is the type of interest that somebody has in a property. It's the amount and the kind of interest that somebody has in real property. And there are two types of estates. There's two types of interests that we're going to talk about. Either you own it or you rent it. Okay. If you rent it, we're going to talk about that in Unit 11. Unit 11 is dedicated to our tenant landlords. So where we are right now is talking about the estate that says you own it. And we talked about our fee simple absolute, which is one we're going to see most of the time. We talked about fee simple defeasible. That's a restriction on use. We said there's one that you can do whatever you want to with this property except one thing. And there's another that says the only thing you can do on this property is one thing. It's a restriction on use, and it's pretty simple. You break the rules, you lose the property. You know the rules when you buy the property. Don't like the rules? Don't buy the property. It's pretty simple. Another type of estate, a freehold estate, is a life estate. And this is where we left off the other day. So a life estate is a restriction on time. Life estates are referred to as partial estates because they do not last forever. They're limited on time. And we have several different types of life estates. The first life estate is our conventional life estate. Remember our picture on page 29? We took our freehold estates and we divided them into two categories. Some are inheritable, some are not. What does it mean if it's inheritable? If it's inheritable, when the individual passes away, they can pass it on to their heirs. If it's not inheritable, when the individual passes away, it means they can't pass it on to their heirs. So a conventional life estate is one of our life estates that's not inheritable. Conventional life estate says you own the property for your life. When that life ends, it either goes back to the person that gave it to you, or it goes on to a named third party, all spelled out in the deed. So how long do you own a conventional life estate? For as long as you're alive. When does the conventional life estate end? When you do. So the life tenant gauges how long you own that property. Again, it either goes back to the person that gave it to you or their heirs, or it goes on to a named third party. If somebody is named in the deed, at the end of this conventional life estate's life, it's going to go on to so-and-so. Conventional life estate. Another type of life estate, VIP in your book. So if you see on like page 30, the left-hand margin, it says VIP. That's a very important point. Absolutely on the exam, that I don't know about. Could it be on the exam? Yes. I can't tell you exactly what's going to be on your test. That would be no fun. But if we're talking about it, it's a candidate for your state exam. Very important point. Okay, so conventional life estate is one type of life estate. Another type of life estate is a marital life estate. And this is our other freehold estate that's not of inheritance. There's only two that are not inheritable: conventional life estate, marital life estate. Marital life estate, think about if an individual owns property and then gets married. And we're going to talk about married people owning property in just a minute. But if an individual owns property and then gets married, and then that individual passes away, the marital life estate says that their new spouse is entitled to some property, some of the property. How much are they entitled to? It depends on how long they were married. So the determination of how long, the yardstick is the length of marriage. How much you get, the length, the yardstick is the length of marriage. Again, we'll talk more about married people owning property in just a minute. Marital life estate. Somebody owns property and then gets married, and then that individual passes away. Another life estate we have, again, a limitation on time. Question came in, remainder man. We're getting ready to talk about remainder man. Could they be an heir? Sure. It's however it's deeded. We're getting to there. Just give me 1 second. We'll talk about that in a minute. Another type of estate is a life estate pour autre vie. Do you guys know you learned in French today? Pour autre vie means for life of another. For life of another. So you have the life tenant, the person that owns the property. How long do they own the property? They own it for as long as the measuring life is alive. There's two people named, the life tenant, the owner, and then the measuring life. The measuring life has no ownership. They have no interest in the property. The measuring life is simply the yardstick to determine how long the life tenant is going to own the property. Pour autre vie, for life of another. There's a really good example of this in your book at the top of page 33. Why would somebody do this? I hear you guys. Why in the world would somebody do this? Austin owns a fee simple title. He conveys the life estate to his brother Carl for the life of Carl's daughter, who has a major disability. So Carl would be our life tenant. Carl's daughter would be our measuring life. How long does Carl own the property? For as long as his daughter is alive. His daughter is the measuring life. Carl has the right to enjoy the ownership of the property. He is the life tenant, but the daughter is the measuring life. Should the daughter die, Carl's estate will terminate and either go back to Austin or Austin's heirs. The daughter never has nor never will have an ownership interest in the property. She's simply the yardstick to determine. Obviously, Austin wants to make sure that his niece has a roof over her head, make sure that she's in a good place. That's exactly right, Cassandra. Austin's making sure that his niece is being taken care of. So why would you do a measuring life? Maybe you're Austin and you want to make sure your niece is taken care of. So with life estates, as we said, they either go back to the person that gave you the property or their heirs, or they go on to a named third party. Well, these people actually have names. So the named third party is known as the remainder interest. If somebody is spelled out in the deed as the remainder man, spelled out as having a remainder interest, when that life estate is over, it will go on to a named third party. The reversionary reverses back. You see the word reverse? The reversionary interest reverses back and goes back to the person that gave it to you, the grantor, the one that gave you the property to begin with. If the grantor is no longer with us, it goes on to their heirs. If nobody is named, the default is the reversionary. The default is to go back. So now the question, back to the question I got a few minutes ago, is the remainder man not considered an heir? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. It depends on who you name as that third party. And guys, remember, anytime we deal with life estates, are we going to whip out our pre-licensing book and try to explain it to our clients? Think that we can handle this? No. With life estates, what are we going to do? We're going to direct them towards an attorney. I'm teaching you guys just enough to be dangerous. But the reason we have this conversation is if you come into a life estate or a fee simple defeasible, you need to know what to do with it. I think our inclination is to try to take care of it. We like to take care of things ourselves, right? In these cases, don't do that. In these cases, we need to get our client to best protect them. We need to get our clients to an attorney. Talking about this life tenant, the person that owns the property, either for their life or the life of another. What can they do? What are their rights? Well, I mean, they own the property. They're just limited on how long they own the property. So what can they do with it while they own it? Pretty much anything they want to. They could profit from them. They could put a tenant in if they wanted to. They could grow corn, harvest the corn. They can use the resources on the property. They don't have to answer to anybody as long as they're not destroying the property. That's the one thing they're not allowed to do. Because in a life estate, somebody else is lined up to take that property after the life estate is over. So pretty much one thing they can't do is destroy the property. They can't destroy it for the future interest. Kate, I'm not seeing that. If they have a mortgage, they have to pay principal and interest, taxes, insurance. They own the property, so they get to pay taxes. If they have a mortgage on it, they get to pay the lender. I have to look at that on break. Okay. Question came in, is the person in line allowed on the property? It depends. Remember we talked about our bundle of rights? Right now, the life tenant holds the bundle of rights. Do they want to exclude you from the property? Do they want to allow you on? Yep, that'd be up to the life tenant. They own the property. Everybody understand, they own the property. They do whatever they want to. They just can't destroy it because they got somebody else lined up to take it next. Over on page 34, we briefly mentioned a homestead. I don't think we need to know much about a homestead. I think what we need to know about a homestead, we're going to mention in Unit 3. So don't get too, bogged down on this right now. I see you guys trying to write down every single word. Don't get too bogged down on this right now. I think what you need to know about a homestead, we're going to talk about in Unit 3. But just the big picture. Remember, you guys remember my PowerPoints are in Learn, Test, Pass. So you don't have to, you're going to hurt your hand by the time we're done. If you're trying to write every single word, I'm telling you, your hand's going to hurt. So with a homestead, it's just a legal life estate. It's known as the family home. Some families may qualify for it, some may not. The big advantage is that they're protected from some creditors. Again, I think what you need to know about a homestead, we're going to see in Unit 3. But I just mentioned it here because it's not in Unit 3, which is why I talk about it. Remember we said the other day, Unit 2 is just kind of all over the place. So we're getting ready to switch gears. Before I switch gears again, let's see if we have any questions on estates, specifically freehold estate. A freehold estate is an estate of ownership. Fee simple absolute is what you're going to deal with the majority of the time. If you ever come across something in your career that's not a fee simple absolute, get an attorney involved. That's why they make the big bucks. Okay. Oh, good. Do we see that? Of course.
As a question, have you ever in your career worked with someone that was not fee simple
Nope.
absolute?
Nope.
Okay. I want to know how common it was. That's why I asked.
And it's out there, obviously, because we're talking about it. And, you know, I mean, I say that and your very first transaction could be a conventional life estate, right? I mean, it's just the luck of the draw. But again, we just need to know what to do if we get that phone call. I have a fee simple defeasible property and I'd like to sell it. Can you help me? Don't go, go, yeah, absolutely, I can help you. Knowing now you know what to do. Everything I've done is fee simple absolute. So again, it's the most common. Okay. All right, let's switch gears. So we've talked about an estate. Estate is just interest. One word can define estate. It's an interest. It's an interest that somebody has in a property. Let's switch gears and talk about ownership. How do you own a property? And there are two types of ownership. There's severalty and concurrent. Of course, we're going to talk about both. If you own a property, ownership and severalty, you are a single owner. You're a sole owner. Severalty means you have severed everybody else away. One man standing. That's the easy one. Ownership and severalty. How many people own it? Just one. That's the easy one. Either you're a single owner or you're a business entity. Concurrent forms of ownerships mean two or more people own it. Maybe it's two, maybe it's 2,000. You have concurrent owners. You have multiple owners. And we have several different types of concurrent forms of ownership. So we're going to talk about each of these. One thing all three of these have in common, let me say that before I start. One thing all three of these have in common, no owner can prevent another owner from accessing the property. Once you have an ownership interest, you're allowed to access the property. It's not like dividing a line down the middle of the property and saying, this is my side and this is your side, right? It's an ownership, it's division of an ownership interest. Anybody in here have siblings that you got to share a room with growing up? Did you share a bedroom with? I'm lucky, I'm an only child, so I didn't have to share anything. So that was cool, I like that. But I've heard stories from some of you that have shared a bedroom. Did you guys ever draw a line down the middle of the room and say, this is my part of the room and this is your part of the room? Don't you come on my side and I won't come on your. Did you guys ever do that with your siblings? You can't do that with concurrent forms of ownership. You're not divvying up the property, you're divvying up the ownership interest. Does that make sense to everybody? So one owner can't deny another owner from coming on the property. So the first type of concurrent form of ownership we have is a tenancy in common. And with tenancy in common, the ownership interests are usually unequal. It's not a 50-50 split or a 25-25, 25-25. Ownership interests are usually unequal. You could be equal, but typically what we see is unequal. And each owner owns an undivided interest. They can sell it, they can convey it, they can mortgage it. They don't have to have permission of the other owners. And when one owner passes away, their interest goes to their heirs. However, their will is spelled out. So they have a separate, undivided interest. Upon their death, their interest passes on to their heirs. So we're getting ready to look at an example in just a second. So let's see, tenancy in common. You have two owners. One owns 60%, one owns 40%. They have an unequal interest. One owner passes away. That 60% is divvied between their heirs. 40% still keeps their 40%, right? That interest hasn't changed. What changed is the 60. We had two owners. Now how many do we have? Now we have three. If the 40% has 5 heirs, when they pass away, it'll be divvied between their 5 heirs, and so on and so on and so on. You see how big, how fast this can get, how crazy this can get out of hand? See why I want you guys calling an attorney? So tenancy in common, typically unequal interests. If one owner dies, that interest goes to their heirs. Another type of ownership is called joint tenancy. Question came in, tenancy in common pretty common? Sure. Absolutely. Joint tenancy, usually the ownership interests are equal. 4 owners, everybody owns 25% interest. With joint tenancy, everybody purchases at the same time. Everybody's on the same deed. They sign, take title all at the same time. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. And we're introducing this idea to you, this concept of you of right of survivorship. Right of survivorship says if you have 2 owners and one passes away, the interest automatically goes to the other owner. Joint tenancy will override a will if you have right of survivorship. What we need to understand, if you have a right of survivorship question on the national section of your exam, I'm sorry, a joint tenancy question on the national section, right of survivorship is automatic. With joint tenancy in North Carolina, it's not favored. It has to be added. It has to be created. So if the attorney is going to create that right of survivorship when they create the deed, and they're going to specifically spell out joint tenancy with right of survivorship.
Hey, Julie.
Yep.
We had an inheritance of a condo that went to 3 siblings. So did that automatically turn into a joint tenancy?
It's either joint tenancy or tenancy in common.
How did we know?
It might be on the deed. You might be able to pull the deed. A lot of times these are spelled out on the deed. Why don't you pull that deed and check that out?
Well, we've sold it now, so.
Oh, okay.
When you say national,
Mhm.
you say it's automatic. What do you mean? Like any other, like I know North Carolina's different.
Mm-hmm. So remember your exams are broken up into 2 sections. There's a national section and a state section. So if it's a national exam topic, joint tenancy, right of survivorship is automatic. If it's specific to North Carolina, then right of survivorship has to be added. It has to be created.
Well, that's just tricky.
Uh-huh. Welcome to pre-licensing. Remember, our red arrow means problem topic. I'm trying to point out some of these problem topics to you guys. There you go. Hint, hint, nod, nod, wink, wink.
Are these people unmarried?
Correct.
Okay.
We haven't gotten to married people yet. I'm getting there next. Yep. Actually, after break. What happens if it's not added? Then we don't have right of survivorship. So tenancy in common, joint tenancy, unmarried. Again, I could have 4 owners here, right? I could have 10. Yes, it must be added. In North Carolina, right of survivorship must be added. So let's look at a picture. Assuming we have right of survivorship. This is what right of survivorship means. Two owners own 50-50. One owner passes away. Last man standing owns in severalty. They now own 100%. This is right of survivorship. Not a stupid question at all, but when I say I add it, I don't write it on the deed. Who adds it? Who creates it? Who puts it on the deed?
Attorney.
The attorney. Can you buy out the others? Sure. It's all in how it's created. Remember, we're not creating it, you guys. If you're working with unmarried buyers, you're going to have a little flag that goes up, aren't you? That little flag that goes up is going to say, we need to have an attorney discuss with our buyers if they want to take tenants in common or joint tenancy. How do they want to take title? So let's look at an example together. Sister and brother purchased a beach cottage, taken title as joint tenants with right of survivorship. The brother later dies. His interest automatically passes to his sister, who is now the surviving joint tenants. I'm getting ready to take a break in just 1 second. She now owns it in severalty. She's the last man standing. I got a few more things to say about joint tenancy. I do see it as break time. So we're going to go ahead and take 10. We come back. We're going to talk a little bit more about joint tenancy. And then we're going to get into when married people own property, which is our tenancy by the entirety. Okay. A couple questions in chat. I tried to address them on break, but there's a few. I think we can. I think there's a few I can address. So right, first off, let me take attendance. Camera's on. If you're back, so I can count you here. Just to make sure we're all clear, I just put my phone number in the chat again. A couple people. So let me take attendance, address a couple questions, and we'll talk a little bit more about joint tenancy. Somebody specifically asked about, would this be good for a flashcard? If you don't feel that you have a good understanding of joint tenancy, then that might be a good candidate for a flashcard. Again, that's what I like about you guys doing your own flashcards, because they're customized to you. Help you wrap your, sometimes we need to be exposed to information more than once before we fully understand it. So if there's something you're not sure about, that's a good candidate for a flashcard. So one of the questions that came in, will the firm that I work for provide an attorney to call? They may offer a preferred attorney, like a preferred vendor list. They may be able to say, look, here's attorneys we worked with in the past. Call one of them. As you guys go on in your career, you're going to meet attorneys, you're going to meet home inspectors and mortgage lenders, and you're going to build your own preferred vendor list. But typically, I can't vouch for every single firm, but typically, yes, when you affiliate with a firm, they'll be able to provide you with some names to kind of help point you in the right direction, understanding that you're building these relationships as you build your career. Why must there be a national section and a local section? That's a good question for the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. I don't know why they do what they do, but they do. So here we are. Phone numbers in the chat. If you missed attendance, yep, you're still seeing this. I'm trying to talk. So if you missed attendance, just let me know that you're here. And now we're going to go back to joint tenancy. And our example about the brother and sister. One of the big distinguishing factors of joint tenancy, what's the one thing that separates joint tenancy? Joint tenancy has these required unities. In order for people to be joint tenant, they have to have these required unities. They all have to be there all at the same time, all taking title at the same time. To be a joint tenant, again, we have that unity of possession. You can't divide the property into fours and say, this is your quarter, my quarter, yours and yours, etc. We usually have a unity of interest. Joint tenancy is going to have equal interest, 25, 25, 25, 25. Again, unity of time, unity of title. All joint tenants are there at the same time. They're all signing the same deed, the same document. I'm going to talk about all title and deed. I think that's unit 5. So we're going to talk more about taking title, having that ownership. So to be joint tenants, we have to have these 4 unities. So what if? I'm falling down the what if trail myself. What if, let's say, for example, the property is owned by 3 or more joint tenants and one conveys their interest. That new owner cannot come in as a joint tenant. Why? Because they weren't there when we originally took title. They weren't there when we all originally took the deed. So let's say we have 3 owners. We're going to get real sophisticated here, and we're going to call them A, B, and C. And A, B, and C are all joint tenants. They were all there, all at the same time, all taking title. They all own 33.3% interest. Joint tenants, joint tenancy relationship. They're all on the same deed. They're all on the same document. They all took title all at the same time. Well, let's say B decides one day that they are tired of A and C. It's not working out for them and they want to sell their interest to D. D comes in as the new guy, right? Was D there when we all originally signed that title? Was D there on the original document? No, D's the new guy. So D can't be a joint tenant. D now comes in as a tenant in common. What happened to A and C though? Did their relationship change? Were they still there at the same time? Did they all take title at the same time? A and C's relationship didn't change. The only relationship that changed is the relationship with the new guy, the relationship with D. You guys please make sure your cameras are on. Now, what do we do if somebody passes away? What happens to their interests? Woo! You want to know more about that? You need to sign up for law school. This just got way out of our realm really fast, didn't it? Again, you guys, this is why we need to talk to an attorney, because now we could be dealing with some have right of survivorship, some goes to their heirs, da 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 da. What we need to know about joint tenancy is that the 4 unities, they come in at the same time, they take title at the same time. If anybody comes in later, if the new guy comes in later, they come in as tenants in common. They can't be joint tenants because they weren't there originally taking title. I do see you, Lily. Yep. Okay. One last thing to say about tenancy in common and joint tenants is how they end, how they're terminated, how we terminate these relationships. You know, either the owners sell their portion of the property, the entire piece of the property, or the court takes the property. Does D have the same percentage as B used to have? Originally, yes. D will come in with 33%, 33.33% interest. Yep. Because they purchased B's share. Okay. Tenancy in common, joint tenants, typically for unmarried people. So what happens if you buy property when you're married? If you're married when you buy property, you buy as tenants in common. Nope. Just making sure you guys are paying attention. If you're married when you buy property, you buy as tenants by the entirety. Sorry about that. Tenants by the entirety. North Carolina is a spousal state, which means it takes 1 to buy and 2 to sell. If you're married, both spouses have to be on the deed to convey the property. Y'all want to know the story I heard in pre-license? I took pre-licensing in 2008. So how many years ago is that? And you know, sometimes stories stick with you, right? So from however many years ago, the story that stuck with me about tenants by the entirety. Gentleman purchases a condo for his mistress. It takes 1 to buy. So he buys his lady friend a condo, signs the deed. That relationship runs its course and ends, and he decides to sell the condo. 1 to buy, how many to sell? 2. He goes to the attorney to sell. The attorney says, what? I need your wife's signature to sell this condo. Gentleman says, gulp. 1 to buy, 2 to sell. Isn't that something? So what should the gentleman do? Well, he either has to fess up and tell his wife that he bought a condo for his mistress, or he finds a tenant. I don't know. Maybe he learns his lesson and going forward, he rents a condo for his mistress and not buys her one. North Carolina is a spousal state. 1 to buy, 2 to sell. I'm going to talk about that in just 1 second, Matt. Bottom line, James, thank you. Just don't cheat. I
So-
will in just a second. Uh-huh.
So, okay, so it did not become the mistress and the married man's.
No, because he just bought it. They are not tenants by the company by the entirety. Why? Because they're not married. That's his mistress.
So,
Who's he married
right.
to? His wife.
So his wife had to sign it
To
in
sell it.
order to sell it. That's awesome.
One to buy, two to sell.
I think I'll remember this story.
Which is why he said gulp. I'm sure he uttered some other 4-letter words, but I'm not gonna, we can fill in the blanks there, right? You know, so, yep, one to buy, two to sell. Christina, I'm gonna talk about quitclaim deeds in Unit 5, so hang on to that question. We'll get to that. We're gonna look at a breakdown in just a second, Gracie. Don't cheat. Yeah, find another mistress, rent your next mistress to condo, right? Find a tenant. Mistress gets nothing. Yeah, because North Carolina is a spousal state. Can one spouse be on the loan? Yep, but we're not talking about the loan. We're talking about taking title. One to buy, two to sell. In order to be tenancy by the entirety, the two have to be married when they purchase. So Matt, getting back to your question. If you own property and then get married, the act of getting married does not create tenancy by the entirety. If you own property and then get married, you have marital rights. Remember our marital life interest, but you're not tenancy by the entirety. The only way you can be tenancy by the entirety is if you're married when you purchase, or if you purposely create it after you get married. I owned a condo before my husband and I got married. I tell him that's my dowry. I came with a condo. It was my condo. I owned it in severalty. We got married. He had a marital life interest because he's my spouse now. I chose to create a tenancy by the entirety. I conveyed the property from Julie Ann Aites to Ryan Campbell and Julie Campbell. We purposely created the tenancy by the entirety. Everybody understand? Just the act of us getting married did not create the tenancy by the entirety. We purposely created it. Question came in, was the wife's name on the deed? No. One to buy, two to sell.
So
With
just a quick,
I'm sorry?
so just a quick question. So even when you do get married, you have to go and change the deed into a tenancy by the entirety. even
You
when
don't
you-
have to. You don't have to. We chose to.
Okay,
If you don't change the deed, the new spouse has a marital life interest, right? How much are they entitled to? It depends on how long we're married when I pass away. You don't have to. But if you own property and then get married and you want to be tenants by the entirety, you have to purposely create it. How do I do that? I'm calling somebody. Who am I calling? An attorney. We're not getting into prenups in this class. I hear what you're saying. Prenups, da-da-da. If you want to know more about prenups, sign up for law school. Why did I choose to do that? Because if something happened to me, I mean, he's already suffering enough. So I didn't want him to, it should be an easy.
One more question.
Uh-huh.
So I know you said that you have to go and create that. It's not just gonna pop up just because you were married.
Correct.
As far as survivorship, if you don't go and create the deed with two married couples, do you still get that survivorship
If you
benefit?
don't create tenancy by the entirety, the new spouse follows the marital life estate.
Oh,
How much property they're entitled to? It depends on how long we were married. Remember when we talked about our life estates earlier today? That's where that marital life estate kicks in. I own property, we get married, he now has a marital life estate, or we create a tenancy by the entirety.
got you. Okay.
Okay. If people are tenancy by the entirety, let's Go back. If they are married when they purchase property and their tenancy by the entirety, right of survivorship is automatic. So you have two spouses. We're married and we buy title. We have a tenancy by the entirety. One spouse passes away. The surviving spouse now owns the property in severalty. They own it. I don't care what this person's will says. We're not getting into prenups. Pretend that that doesn't exist right now. Once passes away, right of survivorship says the remaining spouse now owns it in severalty. Right of survivorship is automatic. I'll get to that in just a second. Tenancy by the entirety is North Carolina, yes. We still have the 4 unities with tenancy by the entirety. Unity of possession, interest, time, title. How do we terminate tenancy by the entirety? Death or divorce or mutual agreement? What's mutual agreement? We decide to sell. We decide to separate ourselves from that title and sell the property. So let's see. Yep, we need to know who signs the deed. I had a couple that moved down from New York a couple years ago, and they were buying a house and they were not married. And they were buying a house. He moved down here for a job. She decided to come with him. He gave her 2 choices. He said, I'll either buy you the ring or I'll buy you the house. What do you want? She said, oh, I want the house. Are you kidding me? They were buying unmarried. Since they were buying unmarried, they could not be tenancy by the entirety, right? And I knew that because they were not married. So what do you think I did? Do you think I whipped out my pre-licensing book and started explaining tenancy in common and joint tenancy to them? Please, everybody shake your head no. I set up a time for them to meet with our attorney so the attorney could explain tenancy in common and joint tenancy and let them tell the attorney how they were going to take title. Bottom line, what it comes down to is somebody asked about the difference in the 2, breaking down. One's equal, one's unequal, but the big picture, guys, is what do you want to have happen to your interest if you pass away? If you pass away, do you want your interest to go to the other owner or do you want it to go on to your heirs? I wasn't involved in that phone call between them and the attorney. It lasted like less than 10 minutes. And I'm pretty sure that's what it boiled down to. When you pass away, what do you want to have happen to your interest? If you want it to go to the other person, in North Carolina, we'll do a joint tenancy and we'll add a right of survivorship. If you want your interest to go to your heirs, we'll do a tenancy in common. So why do we need to know this stuff? Because as somebody said, absolutely. We need to know how that deed needs to convey. We're going to talk all about deeds in unit 4 and 5. Good question, Mo. The laws that we are learning are real estate laws. That's the law I can follow. Stuff like this, I'm not an attorney. I can't offer legal advice. And telling somebody how to take title, if I look at you and say, oh, you should do tenant in common, I'm offering legal advice and I cannot do that. Tara's right on. Your clients come to you. You're their go-to person. They come to you for everything. That's what we want, right? And that's a big part of what we're doing is keep it staying in our lane and making sure we know where to point them in the right direction. Let me say one more thing about tenants by the entirety. Tenants by the entirety is the default for married couples. The default for married couples. They may choose to do tenant in common or joint tenant. Tenants by the entirety is not their only option. It's the default. It's the one that happens most of the time. But guys, I think to answer a lot of the questions that are coming in, yeah, I mean, as a real estate agent, I'm their go-to. I'm their point person. They're relying on me to help them get through this transaction. And as their professional agent, I need to know how to properly advise them. So if you're working with unmarried couples buying a house, you should have a flag that goes up. This is, ooh, our closing attorney needs to discuss with them tenants in common versus joint tenants. They cannot be tenants by the entirety. That's right. That's why they get paid the big bucks, right? I mean, I do have, somebody asked about a breakdown. I do have a nice side-by-side comparison of these 3 concurrent forms of ownership for you guys in Learn, Test, Pass. So we'll look at that in just a second when we finish this unit. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So let's look at an example of tenants by the entirety real quick. While engaged, Tom and Nancy purchased a home in Walkertown. If you're engaged, are you married? Not yet. Guys, there's only 2 answers to the question, are you married? You're either married or you're not. Y'all know that Facebook status, it's complicated. Yeah, this doesn't apply. If somebody says, are you married? You are either are or you aren't. Okay, so they're engaged, which means no, they're not married. They purchase a home while they're engaged. They're both named on the deed as receivers of the deed. That's what grantee means. We'll talk more about that. 1 month after buying the home, they get married. Their marriage does not convert their ownership to a tenancy by the entirety. Why? Because they were not married when they took title. So how do you create a tenancy by the entirety? You're married when you take title, or you purposely create it once you get married. So I mentioned this little side-by-side. Y'all don't worry about writing this down. I have this very slide in Learn, Test, Pass for you guys. So again, it gives you a nice, and I like the side-by-side comparison, not so much now, but in a couple months from now when you are reviewing for your exam. So I'll show you in that in just a second. Does common law apply? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how an attorney would perceive common law. So if they say, well, we're not legally married, but we've been living together for 10 years, have them discuss. Okay, everybody else is telling us no. So thanks, attorneys. Questions on ownership. Getting to switch gears one more time. We got one more little section in Unit 2 to talk about. Guys, remember, as we've been saying, and we will keep saying, because I really need to drill this in your head, we got to stay in our lanes. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an appraiser. I'm not a lender. I'm not an appraiser. I'm not a home inspector, a surveyor. I am just a real estate agent. Okay. Last little section in Unit 2 is on hybrid forms of ownership, also known as common interest communities. The distinguishing factor about hybrid forms of ownership, you have some kind of element of both ownership and severalty and concurrent forms of ownership. And most of the time with a hybrid form of ownership, you have some kind of HOA. You have some kind of owners association that regulates the community, the property. Please understand hybrid forms of ownership can be residential, typically are residential, but they could also be commercial, mixed use. Maybe you have residential and commercial in the same area. So we have several different types of hybrid forms of ownership. And the first type of hybrid form of ownership we have are our condominiums, our condos. Condo owners own air. They own from sheetrock to sheetrock, wall to wall, paint to paint. They own title to the airspace. The common areas are managed by the homeowners association. All of the unit owners own the common areas as tenant in common. So we have 2 types of ownership. They own the air in severalty, or they own the air, they own the air, either severalty or concurrent. And they own the common areas with everybody else as tenant in common. Why don't you guys tell everyone in the chat, let's talk about some examples of things that are considered common areas. Let's watch these fly through. What are some examples of common areas? the pool, the elevator, the gym, the parking lot, the laundry room, the lobby, the tennis court, that's a good one, the gym, the park, recreation center, clubhouse, any condo community, the hallway, the breezeway, any condo community is going to have common areas. They're going to have areas that anybody has the right to access. And those are owned by the tenant as tenant in common, managed by the HOA. With condo ownership, you may also have exclusive rights to common areas. So maybe you have an assigned parking space, or maybe you have your own garage. That's a limited common element. You have ability, you have option to use that. Stairwell, absolutely. Common areas are any things that everybody is allowed to access, everybody's allowed to use. Condo ownership, owners don't own land. They only own the interior. So condo ownerships, we can stack them. We can put one on top of the other, right? You can have a condo owner on level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, because they don't own land. They own interior only. Paint to paint. In North Carolina, we have something called the North Carolina Condominium Act of 1986. The North Carolina Condominium Act of 1986 applies to new construction condominiums. It does not apply to resale. It applies to new construction. The very first owner of the unit abides by the North Carolina Condo Act of 1986. And what this act says is the developer has to have the final plans, the final plat maps, the final covenants, the final everything on record before they sell, before they close on the very first unit. You got to have the finals on record recorded. A buyer deserves to know what they're buying. Can we all agree with that? Would you want to buy a condo under preliminary plans, under preliminary maps? Absolutely not. You can go under contract with preliminary, but you can't close until we have the final. The developer has to have all the final finalized and on record before we can close on the first transaction. The public offering statement is the developer telling the future owner how the HOA is managed, how it's structured, how are dues going to be paid. They're offering the public that information. We'll talk more about HOAs in Unit 6, restrictive covenants. The Condo Act also says that a buyer of a new unit, new construction, the very first owner of the unit has 7 days to rescind their contract. If you rescind your contract, you're taking it back. If you put down any deposits, you get that money back. You take your contract back, you get your deposits back. Both parties go about their business as if this never happened. Nobody's out anything. The contract is terminated. Again, this only applies to new construction. The 7-day recession period does not apply to resale. It's only the first unit of the first owner of each unit. 7 days. Resale, they also have to be provided with that resale certificate, which is, again, the statement of dues, assessments, structure, management, right? A buyer still deserves to know what they're buying. But with a resale, there is no right to cancel. We do not have that 7-day recession period. So North Carolina, we have a Condominium Act of 1986. So condos, airspace, no land. You just own the interior. What's the difference in a condo and an apartment? Pretty much one you own and one you rent, right? You own the condo, you rent the apartment. Another type of hybrid ownership that is out there, but is not real popular in North Carolina, we don't see this much here, is something called a cooperative ownership or a co-op ownership. With a co-op ownership, you don't own property. With a co-op ownership, you purchase stock. And that stock gives you permission to live there. There's no deed. You don't own anything. You don't own real property, I should say. You just purchase stock. These are popular. Think of our bigger, older cities. So think of like New York City, Philadelphia, Boston. These are really common up there. New York City, yep. I've heard of one in Charlotte. I don't know much about it. That's all I know is I've heard of one in Charlotte. I can't even tell you where it is or what it's called. But this is something that just never picked up in popularity in North Carolina. Does that include any type of contract? You're just purchasing the stock. There is no contract. There is no deed. You don't have real property involved. You're just purchasing stock. And that stock that you own gives you permission to live there. That I cannot say this word here. I'm just going to point to it instead. I'm not going to get it out today. Maybe I need one more cup of coffee. That's just your occupancy agreement. That word right there. That's just your occupancy agreement.
Proprietary.
Thank you. Rescued me. That's your occupancy agreement. Why do people do this other than ownership? Maybe they don't want to be locked in. Maybe they don't have a choice. If you want to live in this building, you don't have to deal with taxes. Why? Because you don't own the property. Portion of your HOAs, a portion of your assessments goes towards the things that you pay, goes towards those common bills, but you don't own the property. Got my back. Thank you. I need help on occasion. So thank you guys. Some businesses might be part of a co-op. Sure. Remember, any form of hybrid ownership could be residential, could be commercial. Could be, absolutely. Several down at the Outer Banks. Could they sublease a space? Again, I'm going to say that's going to depend on the community, right? Maybe they'll allow it, maybe they won't. Maybe they don't want renters there. Maybe they will allow it. That's where we go back and look at their rules, their covenants. Another form of hybrid ownership are townhomes. Townhomes usually share a party wall. Townhome owners own a little bit of land. Townhome owners own the air above them. Townhomes are sometimes referred to as row houses because you can put one after another, after another, after another. They have a common wall that they share. With townhomes, the common areas are owned and managed by the HOA. Remember, with condos, we said the common areas are owned by the HOA or managed by the HOA. All the owners own as tenants in common. With townhomes, the HOA owns and manages the common areas. And townhomes are not covered under the North Carolina Condominium Act because townhomes are not condos. Again, townhomes own a little bit of land, usually some out front. They might have a pad out back, a patio out back. They also face assessments, of course, HOAs, all that. If you need to repair the roof, everybody's going to go in the cost of that and a special assessment. Another form of hybrid ownership, common interest community, is a timeshare. If you own a timeshare, you own the right to be there at a certain time. You can't just go down on the weekends. You have a certain time you can be there. Typically, for example, what you see is like 1 week out of the year. So you own this unit with 51 other people, right? And everybody has their week that they go. That's correct. Yes, thank you. So with timeshare, you got multiple purchasers with the same interest in that unit, with the same interest in that property. And the basic definition of a timeshare is the right to occupy during at least 5 or more separate time periods over at least 5 years. What classifies it as a timeshare? What makes it follow the Timeshare Act? You have at least 5 separate time periods over at least 5 years. It's really important that we understand, it doesn't matter what it's called. If you have the right to occupy at least 5 or more separate time periods over at least 5 or more years, it's considered under the Timeshare Act. Now I'm going to talk all about the Timeshare Act is like the very last thing that we talk about. So fast forward to the end of February. We're going to talk a little bit more about timeshares. We will see this again. So if you call it a vacation property or a resort, it doesn't matter what you call it. If it meets this definition, if it meets this criteria, it falls under the Timeshare Condo Act. What? So if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a timeshare. Okay, doesn't matter what you call it if it falls under this act. Purchasers of timeshares are entitled to a 5-day recession period, which means they have 5 days to rescind their contract. They have 5 days to take their contract back. If they put down any deposits, they'll get those back. There's been some concern in the past about shady timeshare ownerships. People feeling that they're taken advantage of, people being forced into a timeshare sale. That's what that 5-day recession period's about. Let's give the purchaser a minute to think about. Let's give them specifically 5 days to think about what they're agreeing to, what they're signing up for. They need to look at the rules, the bylaws. They need to look at the contract. Question comes in, who's responsible for the repairs? The timeshare owners itself, the HOA. Remember, we're all managed and owned by an HOA here too. Yeah, I was trying to be diplomatic, but you're right, William. Timeshares can get very ugly. There's some horror stories out there. And that's why we have the Timeshare Act that we'll talk about last. Super high pressure sales. That's right. People are forced to sign right now. Well, if you're forced to sign right now and then you're handed the documents, isn't it only fair you get some time to think about what you're signing? Isn't it only fair that you have 5 days to back out if you choose? The other distinguishing thing about a timeshare, the developer has a trust account. So when you go under contract, you put your deposit down, the developer has to keep that deposit in their trust account for 10 days. So they keep it there for 10 days if the contract's rescinded. If the buyer rescinds the contract, they return it. If not, then they can transfer it after 10 days to their operating account. But the escrow account, think of it as a safe holding. Think of it as a safe place. We're going to talk all about the escrow account again near the end. We're getting out of the close of February when we're going to talk about timeshares and escrow account. Do brokers sell sell timeshares? Sure. Any timeshare broker has to be licensed. If they're selling in the state of North Carolina, they have to be licensed by the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. So timeshare salespeople have a real estate license. How do they get paid? I have no idea about that. So what do we need to know about timeshares? Why don't you guys do a little exercise with me? Push yourself back from your desk a little bit because I'm going to have you use your arms and I don't want you to punch your computer. So push yourselves back a little bit or stand up if you're able, if you want to stretch for a minute. We're getting ready to take a break. How do we remember timeshares? Let's do this little exercise. Remember timeshares. Y'all ready? I'm going to do it once and then y'all are going to do it with me. All right. How do we remember timeshares? 5, 5, 5, 10 jazz hands. Right? Let's do it together. How to remember timeshares? 5, 5, 5, 10 jazz hands. What are the important things we need to know about timeshares? 5, 5, 5, 10 jazz hands. I just added the jazz hands for fun. This is the big picture. If anybody's thinking about going into timeshare sales, obviously you need more training, you need more education. And seriously, about the last thing that we talk about, the very next to last thing is timeshare. So the Timeshare Act. So we'll see a little bit more about that. Let me say one more thing about timeshares. We just said that timeshare salespeople are licensed by the Real Estate Commission. Timeshares have to be registered with the Real Estate Commission. You can't just start selling timeshares without registering it. The Real Estate Commission typically will not fine a licensee. If you ever get yourself in trouble with the Real Estate Commission, they're going to discipline your license. We'll talk about that in Unit 7. Timeshare developers are the only exception to that rule. The only people that the Real Estate Commission can fine is a timeshare developer. And the Real Estate Commission has the right to fine a timeshare developer up to $500 per violation. Timeshare developers are the only time that the Real Estate Commission will get involved with matters of money. They're the only people they can fine. Other than that, everybody else, they're regulating and disciplining our license. And we'll talk all about that in Unit 7. You don't want that life. Questions on any of our hybrid forms of ownership? I got one more thing to say in Unit 2, and then we're going to wrap it up, and then we're going to take a break. We're just about done with Unit 2. Last thing we're going to mention briefly are trusts. Trusts sometimes are set up to avoid probate. Probate is that legal process after somebody passes away of reading and distributing their will. So sometimes people choose to set up a trust before they pass away instead of a will. So if we're dealing with a trust, there's 3 parties involved. There's the grantor, which is the person that owns the property, given the property. The trustee, which is managing the property, who's going to be an attorney. And then the beneficiary. The beneficiary is the one that's going to benefit. They're the ones that are going to receive the property when the grantor passes away. If we're ever called to deal with a trust, we're going to be dealing with the trustee. We're going to be communicating directly with the attorney because they're the ones managing everything for the grantor and the beneficiary. Why would somebody do a trust? Maybe they don't want their loved ones to go through the probate. Can get drawn out. It can get expensive. It can get tiring. So maybe they set up a trust so their loved ones don't have to deal with that, with probate after they pass. Okay. Shoo, we made it. Unit 2 is weird, you guys. And I think part of the reason why Unit 2 is because we have, well, new information, right? A lot of new information, but it's several different topics. So if you break it up into sections, estates, interests, ownership. So as we're reflecting back on what we learned in Unit 2, we got our key terms on page 20. That key point review, that Cliff's Notes, that abbreviated version. Pages 43 to 46. And then your student quiz, 47 to 49. Student quiz is going to be a little bit tougher, Unit 2, than Unit 1 was. Okay, before we go to break, let me just point out real quick. In Learn, Test, Pass, the Unit 2 material. So there's a good quiz. Some of these are interactive, like this one, for example, is interactive, and it'll give you the answer as you go. I also have some quizzes in here that are flat PDF. Either way, you provide the answers. There's that concurrent forms of ownership, that side by side that we had the PowerPoint slide. Again, I think this is more beneficial to you guys when you're preparing to take the end of class exam, because by the time we get to the end of class exam, joint tenancy is going to be a thing of the past. So this will be a good way for you guys to review that information. The other thing I have in here for you guys is a Q&A on condos and townhomes. So the North Carolina Real Estate Commission has published a ton of Q&A brochures geared towards the public. Remember, part of their purpose is to educate the public. But my thinking is, why can't we use this information when we're trying to better understand it, better wrap our brains around it? So this is a Q&A on condos and townhomes I put in for you guys. You can look at it, you can, it's up to you. But I think it kind of gives you a better understanding of the difference of condos and townhomes. Questions? Oh, good question. So how do we get Learn, Test, Pass? If you don't still have that link that we logged in with the other day, actually, I put that link back in chat, so you can bookmark that link or save that link. So I'll do that right now on break. So you can save it, bookmark it, and then that's how you access Learn, Test, Pass every time. I do suggest you guys logging out, log back in, because if I change something, I want you to see the revised. So if you log in and stay logged in, it may not refresh. Does that make sense? So if you log out and log in every time, but I'll put that link again in the chat so you guys can grab it and save it. Thank you. I'll do that right now while we're on break. Okay. All right, let's take 10. We come back, we're going to do a little math introduction. Let's see, do I have a question or an accidental unmute? What we got? So I put in the chat at the beginning of break, the link again to Learn, Test, Pass. So again, that's how you're going to log on each time. So if you want to go ahead and grab that again and then bookmark it, save it. Question came in, is there a midterm? Nope. 2 tests. End of course exam and state exam. Let me do point out to you and Learn, Test, Pass though. In addition to the units, there's like, for example, a 25% exam. There's a 50% exam, right? So as we go on, it's going to have you go back and, okay, now that we're halfway through, let's go back and take this. So it does, Learn, Test, Pass does kind of take in account a midterm. So in addition to quizzes within each unit, like I said, there's a 75% and 100 as well. Treat them all like a real test. Anytime you sit down to take a quiz, pretend like it's test day. Set your timer. And in just a second, I'm going to show you guys how a fun way you guys can grade yourselves. Okay, so lots of cameras not on yet. I'm hoping that'll change in just a second. So I need to take attendance because it's been 10 minutes. And we're going to do a little math introduction. So, you know, this is just, we don't actually get into the math until unit 3. So it'll be Tuesday before we start getting into real math. But I just want to kind of give some of you guys a little introduction. And if you miss attendance, please tell me in the chat that you're back so I can count you here. So my suggestion is maybe just sit back and chill for a second. Put your pencil down, just take this in. I'll have you pick your calculator up in just a second. If you haven't been calculator shopping yet, you're okay to use your phone today. Do please go calculator shopping sooner rather than later. Okay. Guys, this calculator is not near as smart as the calculator on your phone. The calculator on your phone is really smart. This one, not so much. So what I want you guys using this one, because you get comfortable with the smartness of this one, and then you're struggling on test day. Trying to prepare you guys for that exam. Okay. You guys see your little light? Okay. So good. Somebody's got theirs coming on Amazon. Don't we just love, what do we do before Amazon? We actually had to like drive to the store and buy something, whatever. That's so behind us now. Thank you, Amazon. Question came in, if exam's going to be in person or online. It's online. Okay. So let's just talk about kind of a math introduction. Again, we're not actually getting in the math on until Tuesday. So in this class, we do quite a bit with percentages. And when we're talking about percent, we just mean per 100. So if we say percent, we're just saying per 100. So for example, if I were to say, or if the math problem were to say, again, for example, if 5% of the homes on the street are yellow, all I'm saying is that 5 out of every 100 houses are a yellow. 5% just means 5 out of 100. When you're reading math problems, remember we've talked about some of these words that we can look at, some of these words that we can look out for and pay attention for. And when you're reading a word problem and you see the word of is just a fancy way of saying multiply. So when you're reading a word problem, if we were to say 350,000 times 25%, it's the same thing as me saying 25% of $350,000. So when you see the word of in a math problem, What should your brain tell you to do? Means I get to multiply something, right? So these words can help us. Guys, I get it. I get it. We don't like math. I'm about maybe the only one. Is anybody with me? I'm not the only math nerd on this call, am I? Tell me there's others of you. Okay, thank you. I don't like being alone. Math isn't everybody's thing, and I get it. You know what? Math is my thing. You know what I can't do? I cannot spell to save my life. Not everybody can be good at everything, right? So we have our strengths and we have our, if you're a really good speller, I envy you, but you may not be so good at math, right? So one thing we can do is identify these words. Let these words in the math problem help us know what it is that we're supposed to do, what it is that we're supposed to be doing. So you guys pick up your calculator, either your new or again today, if you need to use your phone, that's fine. I want you guys to tell me in a private message. Anytime we do math, you're always going to tell me in a private message. Tell me in a private message what is 25% of $350,000. Private message. And I'll tell you why I want that in just a second. 25%, what is 25% of $350,000? Cassandra, your camera's not on. I think you're there because I just heard you, but I can't see you. Isaac, you as well. So far, I'm liking every single answer that I'm seeing. The reason when we do math, there's twofold. The reason why we do math, when I do math in class with you guys, I always want you to send me a private message. The reason being twofold. One, I don't want you guys to feel embarrassed if maybe you have the wrong answer. When it comes to math, this is a judgment-free zone. Okay, we're all starting this, we're all learning this together. And the last thing I want you guys to do is be worried about putting in the wrong answer. So by telling me what the answer is, that's just between me and you. But I ask for it because it gives me an idea of how we are doing. The second reason I have you guys send me a direct message is because I know some of you. If I had you guys tell everybody, some of you would just sit there and wait until you saw somebody else's answer and say, oh yeah, that's my answer too. And then you would put it in without trying. When it comes to math, you got to pick up your pencil, you got to pick up your calculator, and you just have to try. Period. End of story. Get used to me saying this. With math comes practice, practice, practice. How do we get good at the math? Practice, practice, practice. Watching me do it in class is really easy. Guess what I'm not doing for you on your test? The math. I got to wean you off me, and I got to have you guys doing it on your own. So anytime we do math will always be a direct message. So what is 25% of 350,000? Your basic calculator. You take 350,000, put in 350,000. What do we say the word of means? Of means multiply. So you say 350,000 times 2, 5, and then your percent key. And what do we get? 87,500. Let's all agree. Let's get this out here right now. 25% is the same as 0.25. How do I convert from a percent to a decimal? I move my decimal place over, my decimal point over 2 places. So 0.25, you have choices. That's right, you have choices. You can say 350,000 times 25%, or you say 350,000 times 0.25 equals. I don't care how you do it. This is what I think about the math. I think all of our brains see things differently. I think you're going to get it differently. Okay, somebody divided by 4, fantastic. If that's how your brain saw it, fine. Back in the day when we were in person, it's kind of hard for me to do it now because as we learned the other day, we are just scattered out all through over the state. But back in the day when we were in person, we were sitting in one classroom together. And I used to look at you guys and say, if I were to just say right now, just out of the blue, let's all go to the mall. Let's jump up, run out to our cars and meet at the mall. Are there more than one ways to get to the mall? Is there more than one way? Is there only one right way to get to the mall? Some of you may jump on the highway. Some of you may go down the road. Some of you may take the back roads. Some of you may head a dead end and have to turn around and come back out. Is there a right way to get to the mall? No, there are multiple ways to get to the mall. And what's the only objective? To get to the mall. Guys, I don't care how you get the right answer. Just get to the mall. Okay? Your math on your exams are A, B, C, and D. That answer is looking at you. That one right answer is looking at you. I don't care how you get to the mall. It does not make one difference to me. Just get to the mall. So if you see things differently than what we're talking about in class, fantastic. If math isn't your thing, maybe stick with me until you get comfortable with it and then start exploring other ways to see it. Okay? So far, so good? So again, set a private message just to me. I'm going to put a math problem up. I'll give you guys just a few minutes. Tell me in a private message what you think the answer is, and then we'll talk about it together. So when we first see a math problem in your practice and on your exams, I want you guys to, actually, as a matter of fact, I would like you reading these math problems 3 times. The first time you see a math problem, just read it. Just read the problem. Don't pick your pencil up, sit on your hands if you have to. Just read the problem. Once we get into more of this math, these problems are going to get longer and longer and longer. Remember earlier today, we talked about distractions. And you know what type of problem they really like to put distractions in? Math problems. There's going to be more numbers in here than what you need. So just read the question and figure out, what's the question asking me? What is it that I'm solving for? Once you read the question, then you go through the problem again, you put pencil to paper, pick up your calculator, do the work. And then the third time you read the math problem, I want you to make sure that the answer you have is the answer they're looking for. Again, they like to trick you. I'm being as honest as I can with you guys. They like to trick you. They like to try to throw you off. How do you get good at the math? Practice, practice, practice. So we see a math problem, and the very first thing we're going to do is just read it. Put your pencil down. Lane sells her home for $250,000 and pays a real estate agent's firm a commission of 5% of the sales price. What is the total commission paid? Of the information in this problem, what is the only thing I care about? The only thing I care about is total commission. If there's information in here that doesn't get me to total commission, that's called a distractor. And as we said earlier, what's a distractor's job? To distract you. Don't fall victim to the distractor. Focus only on what the question is asking you. So we know Lane's selling her home for $250,000. Firms have paid a commission 5% of the sales price. 5%, what's the word of mean? Multiply. So the sales price on your calculator, say 250,000. Of means multiply times 5% or 0.05, whatever. How much is the total commission paid? $12,500. What do we do with that $12,500? We will talk about that in Unit 8. We're going to talk all about your commission and how much you're going to get paid and all that good stuff. That's math that we'll actually do in Unit 8. Any questions so far on the math? There are some formulas that we have to memorize. We'll learn those as we go. I think anytime we have a formula, that's a good candidate for a flashcard. Guys, bottom line, if you don't know the formula, you don't know what to do with all these numbers. Knowing the formula is like 80% of the battle when it comes to the math. It's of my opinion that we can get a good chunk of this math by learning and understanding and studying something that I call the T-bar. You guys, please take a minute and write this down. I think if we can get the T-bar, we can get a good portion of this math. So let me give you just a minute to write it down, and then we're going to talk about what all this means. I'm a huge fan of the T-bar. The majority of the time, when you see rate or percent in a math column, not all the times, there are some exceptions, but the majority of the time when you see rate or percent in a math problem, we can use a T-bar. A T-bar uses three variables, three unknown variables. One of them being the rate or the percent, another variable being a part, the other one being the whole. I'll talk about those in a second. The rate or the percent is the easy one. The rate or the percent always goes in the bottom right. Did you guys just hear my absolute word right there? The rate or the percent always goes in the bottom right. So when you're reading a math column, you see rate or percent, where does it go? Bottom right, every single time. I've eliminated, we went from 33% to 50%, right? So now the question is, what's the part and what's the whole? The majority of the time, the part is going to be the smaller number. When you're talking about two variables, two numbers, the majority of the time, the part's going to be the smaller number. In Unit 2, in Unit 12, we're going to see examples where the part is bigger. Other than that, the part is a smaller number. So for example, as we learned in the previous problem, commission is part of sales price. Sales prices, commission is paid off of sales price. Which number should be smaller, commission or sales price? As much as we hate it, commission is going to be smaller than sales price. Okay, so it depends on what numbers you're talking about. The back fourth line right here means divide. The back fourth line means divide. The up down line means multiply. When I'm using the T-bar, I have one unknown variable. I have one X that I'm solving for, and I have two known variables. The T-bar gives me three formulas. If I'm solving for the part, I take the whole times the percent. If I'm solving for the whole, I take the part divided by the percent. If I'm solving for the percent, I take the part divided by the whole. Back forth line means divide. Up down line means multiply. So the T-bar, you guys have choices. You can either work with me and grasp the T-bar, or you can memorize three formulas. You can memorize the formula for the part. It's an example of why one of the many reasons that I work so much. Let's say you're reading a word problem and it tells you the commission is $3,000. That's commission. The commission rate is 3%. And the problem wants to know what is the sales price. So what is my X? My X is a sales price. I read the problem. I got the information. I saw rate or percent. So my little brain says, ooh, I can use a T-bar. When I'm solving math, I always like to start with where I want to end. Identify your X first. Because if there's information in the problem that doesn't get me to X, that's a distractor. So what am I solving for? What's my unknown? My unknown is the sales price. And again, I ask you, which is smaller, the sales price or the commission? Unfortunately, commission is smaller, right? So my sales price is going to be the whole. I got a solution for you, just a second. So my X, what I'm identifying is my sales price, the bottom number on the X on the bottom left. Julie said the rate always goes here, always. So now we know we have commission on top. So to solve for X, what do? I take 3,000, divide it by 3%. And as some of you are correctly telling me, what's my sales price? $100,000. I took 3,000, I divided by 3%. I have a sales price of $100,000. So what if, I hear you, Julie, what if I do not remember sales price goes on bottom? What if I can't remember? Does commission go on top? Does commission go on bottom? What do I do? One thing I like so much about the T-bar, y'all, staring at a blank piece of paper, waiting on numbers to like magically appear in front of you, it doesn't work that way. You need to pick a pencil up. You need to do something. Are you going to get the wrong answer sometimes? Yes. This is how we learn. If you're never sure what number goes on top, what number goes on bottom, what did Julie say about the percent or the rate? Where does it always go? Always on the bottom right. That's the no-brainer. Should 3,000 go on top? Should 3,000 go on bottom? My suggestion to you is do it both ways. Now tell me what happens if we multiply. I take 3,000 times 3%, and I get a sales price of $90. Does that make sense? One, to sell a house for $90, but two, to sell a house for $90 and you walk away with $3,000 in your pocket. As much as we would like that, that's not realistic. By taking just a few minutes and working it both ways, we can usually rule out one of the answers. Rate of percent always goes on the bottom right. If you hear nothing else that I tell you today, hear me when I say this. Rate of percent always goes in the bottom right. And if you're not sure what number goes on top and what number goes on bottom left, do it both ways. I've been offering math tutoring for, gosh, I'm coming up on 15 years now for pre-licensing. And in my 15 years, hands down, the number one question I get in math tutoring is, when do I divide and when do I multiply? And my highly educated response to you is, do it both ways. Don't waste precious test time staring at your calculator, hoping it's going to magically form the number for you. Do it both ways. That took me, what, all 3 seconds. 100,000 sales price makes more sense to me than a $90 sales price. I can put down that answer and move on. This is why I'm such a big fan of the T-bar. When we do, we're going to use it a lot. I can't use it every time. Some formulas we just have to memorize. Again, when we get there, I'll tell you that's a good candidate for a flashcard. But let the T-bar help you. I say that it's Julie proof. Like, I can't even mess this up. No matter how hard I try, I can't even mess this up. Because usually one of these answers is going to make sense and one isn't. Questions, comments about the T-bar? If you're not sure about it yet, don't worry, I'll convert you before it's over. I'll have you guys as T-bar fans probably the end of Unit 3. Because we're going to use our first real world example with Unit 3. I got to believe her already. So Dawn, I think did we answer that? Did we answer your question? Where's Dawn? I got some cameras off, you guys. I don't have time to keep asking you guys to turn your cameras on. Thank you. Okay. You guys see the light? If you see the light, you know your camera's on. Okay, so back to the problem that we first saw. Now let's take our newfound knowledge of the T-bar. Same thing we just saw. We already know the answer. Lane sells her home for $250,000 and pays her real estate agent's firm a commission of 5% of the sales price. What is the total commission paid? I've read the problem. I saw rate or percent, right? Rate or percent. And my brain said, ooh, for the most part, I can use a T-bar. Throw down my T-bar and then start filling in what you know. First off, what am I solving for? What's the problem asking me? What's my X? Identify your X first. My X is the commission paid. I know the rate or percent goes in the bottom right. And my sales price is $250,000. The up down line means multiply. You take 250,000 times 5%. We have total commission paid of $12,500. Again, do you get that whole $12,500? Now we're going to talk about that in Unit 8. So hang on to that for now. I wish I could cut you a check for $12,500, but we'll talk about what commission means, Unit 7 and 8. Okay. T-bar, big fan. If you will, just really quick, look in your books in the back. That math facts section that we pointed out yesterday, if math isn't your thing. Page 786. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 second. 786, the book calls it an X bar. Same thing. So there's a little bit more for you with some practice if you want. And again, we're jumping into this Tuesday. We're going to start doing some real math at the end of Unit 3. We're going to talk all about commission. No such thing as average commission. We'll talk all about it when we get to Unit 8. If you don't want to wait, you can look ahead. let's see, I missed a couple questions before we started doing the math. So I'm going back right now to make sure if I ever miss you, I don't intentionally mean to miss your question, but if I never answer a question, please either retype it or reach out to me after class. Remember, I am very available outside of class, and I want you guys to reach out to me. About your exam, both tests are online, my test and state exam. Mine is online. State exam, you have an option of either going in person or taking it online. We'll talk about that as we get closer. Let's see, and we need the Learn Test Pass link again. So let me grab that. So I just put the link to Learn Test Pass back in the chat if you didn't. Can you have some problems? You can do practice. Yep, you can start with page 786. Good place to start. We'll start some actual math. Unit 3. Never fear. Never fear. I got plenty of practice for you guys. Somebody already found a typo in the book. It happens. I wish I could tell you the book is perfect. I wish I could tell you anything's perfect. Are there errors? Sure. Good for you for finding them. If you're not sure, just reach out to me. Y'all never hesitate to reach out to me after class, outside of class. So if you're not sure, just let me know. Questions? Give you guys something to think about this weekend. Math, eek. Spelling, battles in my household growing up over spelling homework. Battles. It was like that. Either you can do it. My mom, not to show my age, but my mom used to say, it's not like you're going to be able to walk around with a dictionary with you wherever you go. Ha! I fixed that, didn't I? Thank you, technology. And yes, I remind her of that. You told me. All right. How we doing? Everybody okay? Everybody good? Hanging in there with me? Because we keep going, we keep moving. Unit 3 is all about encumbrances on real property. Yes, we will define an encumbrance. Unit 3, everything in Unit 3 is an encumbrance. So in Unit 3, we're going to define and we're going to identify the different types of encumbrances. Unit 3 is when we get into our property taxation laws. And at the end of Unit 3, we get to do our first math. We're going to learn how to calculate property taxes. Probably won't get to that today. Might be what we get to start with on Tuesday. If we do get it today, it'll be an intro, but I doubt. So in Unit 3, first off, defining an encumbrance. An encumbrance is just anything that affects title. Again, we're going to talk all about titles and deeds in Unit 5. It's just anything that affects the title. It's not necessarily good or bad. Every single property has some type of encumbrance on it. It's just some kind of limitation. It limits what you can do with the property. Every single property, for example, every single property in North Carolina is subject to taxation. That's an encumbrance. So everything we talk about in Unit 3 is an encumbrance. The government, for example, taxation, has the right to collect taxes. They're not the owner. But because of taxation, they have an interest. They have a right. What's their right? To collect taxes from us every year. A question came in about land use controls. No, we're going to specifically talk about land use controls in Unit 6. Yep. So the first type of encumbrance we're going to talk about is a lien. When you see the word lien, I want you to see the word loan. If you have a lien on your property, it means you owe somebody some money. If you have a lien on your property, you owe somebody some money. It's a non-possessory charge. It's a security for a debt. The lien holder is the person that you owe money to, the entity, the business that you owe money to. How do they make sure? How do they protect their interests and try to get paid? They record that lien. Most liens are on public record. We'll talk all about recording when we talk about deeds and titles in Unit 5. There are two types of liens. The first type of liens are specific liens. A specific lien is specific to this property. It attaches to and follows 123 Main Street. It's specific to the property. Some examples of specific liens is the deed of trust. In North Carolina, we're awfully fancy. What we actually call our mortgage is our deed of trust. We'll talk about the deed of trust in our financing units, units 14 and 15. If you have a deed of trust on your property, you owe the lender money. You had to borrow funds to purchase the property. How do they protect their interest? They put their deed of trust on record to make sure they get paid. Real property taxes, as I just said, every property in North Carolina is subject to some type of taxation. We all owe taxes every year. We'll talk more about taxes at the end of this unit. Failure to pay your taxes creates a lien on the property. Another type of lien is special assessments by the government. We actually got two types of special assessments. So let's make sure first we understand the difference. Government special assessments, and then there could be HOA special assessments. We'll talk about the HOA in Unit 6. When there's a special assessment put on the property, it's put on to improve the property. So why would the government put special assessments on the property? Maybe they are installing street lights. Maybe they are connecting an entire neighborhood to public sewer, public water. Anytime the government is improving the property, they put a special assessment on the property. Failure to pay the special assessment will put a lien on your property. Another specific lien is the mechanics lien. Hang on to that. We're going to talk about all that in just a second. So don't worry about that right now. And then there's something out there called the North Carolina Commercial Real Estate Broker Lien. Commercial agents may have the ability to put a lien on the property to protect their commission. Unfortunately, that only applies to commercial, not residential. As a commercial agent, if you want to put a lien on a property, who should you call? Who do you think? Call your attorney. So our specific liens, again, specific liens attach to the property. They're specific to 123 Main Street. So let's talk about this mechanics lien. Let's kind of back up just a bit and make sure we're good on this, the mechanics lien. We have the North Carolina Mechanics Lien Law. And a mechanic is just anyone that improves to the property. Maybe they perform labor, they furnish material. They contribute to the improvement of the property. If you don't pay the mechanic may put a lien on you. Why don't you guys tell us in the chat, what are some examples of people that could be considered mechanics? What are some examples of people that could improve the property, perform labor or materials? Contractors, there we go. HVAC, home renovations, builders, plumbers, window installers, home improvement, painters, yes, the painter. Roofing, developer, flooring. All these people that you guys are mentioning are a mechanic. They're adding value. They're improving on the property. Landscapers, absolutely. So anybody that performs labor, furnishes materials, considered a mechanic. Failure to pay them means they could put a lien on your property. They got to protect their kitchen, their, why did I say kitchen? Their commission, their money, their interest. Tile works, yeah, absolutely. The North Carolina Mechanics Lien Law says commercial or residential projects that the cost is more than $30,000. If the cost is more than $30,000, then we have to have a designated lien agent assigned to the project. So what are I mean, seriously, projects that are $30,000, we're doing major renovations, right? Maybe we're adding on a room, or we're doing a major uphaul on the bathrooms or the kitchen. If you have a project that's more than $30,000, you're probably involving a contractor, a plumber, an electrician, a tile guy, a painter, right? Like you have several different people in there doing the work. And if you're improving on the property, then they're going to have a designated lien agent. They're going to have one person responsible for making sure that the work gets done and that the work is paid once it's complete. So you have one person designated to kind of manage the project. Now, an exception is an owner-owned single-family residence. Somebody said a do-it-yourselfer. Do-it-yourselfers are exempt. If you're doing it, you're not hiring contracted work. That's what we mean by a do-it-yourselfer. You have a hammer and a YouTube video and you say, I can do this. I don't need to hire anybody. Possibly new homes. Does it have to be a house? Nope, just an improvement on the land. Anytime you're improving the land. So the mechanics lien law says that the mechanic has up to 120 days from when they last provided the labor materials to file the lien. So think about it. You hire somebody to come and do a project, and they probably make you sign something, and they probably make you say you have 30 days or 60 days to pay after the work is done. Day 61, you haven't paid. Maybe they send you another letter. Maybe they call you. Day 90, you still haven't paid. Maybe they try one more time. Still no payment on day 119. They file a lien. The only way that they can protect their interest is to file the lien. Liens are public record. We'll talk all about that in Unit 5. If the mechanic fails to file the lien within 120 days, they lose their right to collect. They no longer have a leg to stand on. So it must be filed within 120 days from when the work finished. The mechanic has 180 days to enforce, to bring action to enforce. The mechanic could start the foreclosure process on you. Anybody that owes you money, or excuse me, anybody that you owe money to can foreclose on you. They can collect on you. So 120 days to file the lien from when the work ended, 180 days to start the foreclosure process. Now, let's be honest. Most painters aren't in the foreclosing business, right? So you don't pay the painter, are they going to foreclose on you? I don't know. Their job is to do paint. They can. Does that mean they always do it? Don't really know. You can always take anybody to court. You can sue anybody for anything. Could they drag you to court? Yes. But if they don't file that lien within 120 days, they've lost their right to collect. I'm going to talk all about foreclosure in our financing units, 14 and 15. So I'm going to go back for 1 second. Again, don't worry about that homestead. That's different. We're going to talk about what you need to know in this unit. I'm going back for 1 second. The designated lien, think of the contractor that's coordinating the whole project. So who is the designated lien agent? They're the one person that's appointed to coordinate the entire project. When a property is being sold, the owner of the property has to satisfy any outstanding liens before they can convey their deed, before they can transfer their deed to the new owner. So why do all these all these lien collectors record? So when the property goes up for sale, they are standing in line with a handout. They want a chance to get paid, right? How do they get paid? It's public record. And there's a certain order in which people get paid. Taxes and government special assessments are known as superior liens. Taxes and government special assessments are known as superior liens, which means they always get paid when? First. They're standing first in line. You sell the property, the government standing there with their hand out going, you pay me before you can convey this title. Makes sense to me. The government makes the rules, the government gets paid first. Makes total sense to me. If I was making the rules, you know who I would make sure got paid first? Me. Makes total sense. After superior liens, all other liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded. Once we pay superior liens, all other liens are paid in the order in which they are recorded, except for the mechanics lien. The mechanics lien is paid in the order in which the work began. The mechanic has 120 days to file the lien after the work ended. That lien is retroactive to when the work began. Let's think this through for a second. What if you're building a house? One of the very first people you have out to build your house is the cement contractor, right? Because they got to pour your foundation. They got to pour your slab. They're one of the first people on the lot. So then we put up the studs and the sheetrock and the exterior and paint, blah, 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 kitchen cabinets. One of the last people we call is the cement people to come back and do your driveway, do your sidewalk. So the cement people, for example, are going to be one of the first people we call and one of the last people we call. You guys with me? So in order to protect the cement people, they're going to file the lien 120 days after they poured the driveway, but that work is retroactive to when the work began, to when they put down your foundation. So you have your superior liens, always first. After that, all other liens are paid in the order in which it's recorded, except for the mechanics lien. The mechanics lien is paid in the order in which the work began. Specific liens follow the property. So right now, we're just talking about specific liens that follow the property. Let's see, we want to go back. 120 days is to file the lien. 180 days is to foreclose, is to bring action to enforce. So we're getting ready to look at an example together. Y'all put your pencils down for a second. You guys are hurting my hand as much as you write. Just put your pencil down for a second. Okay. So let's pretend that on August 8th, your hot water heater goes out. You call the hot water heater guy, he comes out and he fixes it or repairs it. You say, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I hate cold showers. You fail to pay the guy. 120 days, roughly. Please don't get in semantics with me about, well, 1 month has 31 days, da, 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 da. 120 days roughly is December 8th. 120 days later, 4 months later. Everybody with me? Failure to pay the mechanic by December 8th, 120 days later, that's when they have to file their lien. If they don't file the lien by December 8th, they lose their right to collect. They lose their right to stand in line with their hand out when you sell your property. 180 days would be February 8th. So if they choose, when could they start the foreclosure process? They can't foreclose on you until February 8th. Everybody with me? 120 days to file the lien, 180 days to foreclose. What if August is a bad month? And 2 days after your hot water heater goes out, now in the hot August, your AC quits. You call the guy, he says, I can't get out there until the 16th. I'll do it on the 16th. You say, great. Comes out on the 16th, replaces or repairs your AC. You say, thank you so much, but you don't pay the guy. 120 days from when the work ended. So when did the work end? On August 16th, 120 days, December 16th, 180 days, February 16th, 120 days from when the work ended, 80 days from when the work ended. You have the work done, you don't pay them. The AC guy files his lien on November 20th. The hot water heater guy files his lien on December 1st. They're all within their they're both within their 120 days, right? Both of them are within their 120. Do I need to go back? Both of them are within their 120 days. This one had until the 8th, this one had until the 16th. So they're in compliance. They filed their liens in time. Tell me in a private chat, if you want, who is going to get paid first? Who is in line to get paid first? Is it the water heater or is it the AC guy? Some of you guys are second guessing yourselves. So who's paid first? Even though the AC guy filed his lien first, mechanics liens are not paid in the order in which they're recorded. They are paid in the order in which the work began. Who did their work first? The hot water heater guy. So who gets paid first? The hot water heater guy. Mechanics liens are the only lien not paid in the order in which they're recorded. They're paid in the order in which the work began. Okay. Ponder that for about 10 minutes. I'll address any questions. It's break time. So no, I didn't mean to stop sharing. Let's take 10. We come back, we'll address any questions, and then we're going to talk about general liens, different type of lien. Okay. Are we back? Almost got 1 week down already. Guys, this time goes by fast. So we're going to study this weekend. We're going to look at what we've talked about this weekend. Are we going to look ahead this weekend? Unit 3, Unit 4, Unit 5. See how this kind of works? Guys, remember, I'm always here to help. I'm always here to answer questions. Never, ever hesitate to reach out to me. If there's anything I can do to help, that's why I'm here. Okay. So if you're sitting there going, oh, is it okay to call Julie? Is it okay to email Julie? Yes. Text me, email me is my preference. I work really well with screenshots, pictures. If you're stuck on something, instead of trying to explain it to me, send me a picture, take a screenshot. Okay. Do you have something covering your camera? I know my husband used to make me keep electrical tape on my camera so they couldn't watch me. I never thought I was that interesting that they would want to watch, but he's worried that they do. So we may need to get you, Miss Johnson, we may need you to get with Lane or Jane after class, because as if not covered, I'm not sure why your camera's not working. So learn test, guys, the syllabus is the guide for your state exam. If it's in the syllabus, it's a good candidate before your state exam. Yeah, I'm not that interesting, really. And I told you I drink beer, you know, all right. I mean, woo, okay. All right, let me take attendance. Camera's on. If you're having any technical difficulties, if you can't access Zoom, if you can't get on the call, you want to reach out to Jane. Jane is our IT guru. Sometimes just logging out and logging back in fixes the problem. So maybe you want to try that. My knowledge with technology, turn it off, count to 10, turn it back on. Most of the time that fixes it. If not, that's when I get my husband involved. Honey, this doesn't work. Okay. So specific liens are specific to the property. Everybody good with that? They attach to the property. So let's talk about this. Let's say the seller's getting right. Cameras on, please. When I take attendance, you got to leave your camera on. Just because I take attendance doesn't mean you can turn it off now. You have to have it on all time, not just for attendance. If you're having problems, please just get with Jane. She can help. So let's talk about these specific liens, particularly the mechanics lien. Let's put this in a real world situation. Let's say you're getting ready to list a property. Somebody calls you and says, I want you to sell my house. And you go, yay. So you go out to the listing appointment. The seller says, what are some things I can do to make my listing more sellable, make my home more sellable? And you say, well, you know, a coat of paint does wonders. And maybe we have a landscaper come in. You recommend a couple things that they do. So the seller says, great, I'm going to call the painter and I'm going to call the landscaper. Those are mechanics, right? Seller has the work done. What if they don't pay? The property conveys, the new owner owns the property. Day 119, the mechanic puts the lien on the property. That lien is on the property, not the previous owner that didn't pay. It attaches to the property. Everybody with me? What if you're under contract and your seller agrees to do repairs? We'll talk about repairs in unit 7 and 8. Again, they have the repairs done. They tell the buyer, yeah, I'll be happy to do that repair, but they never pay. Day 119, the mechanic files a lien. What's it attached to? It attaches to the property. They don't go after the previous owner that ordered the work and didn't pay. Everybody hear what I'm saying? It attaches to the property. So how can we protect our new owner? How can we protect the poor unsuspecting buyer that buys a house and then later learns that they had a lien put on their home? Usually when they go to sell, they find out that there's a lien put on the home. Couple things. First off, The seller's going to sign paperwork at closing that says, I promise this won't happen. They sign an affidavit saying that this won't happen. Unfortunately, I wish I could stand here and tell you that people don't lie, but do people lie sometimes? There's an old saying in this industry: sellers are liars, buyers are too. Buyers are liars, sellers are too. Sometimes people lie. So the seller goes to closing, they go, we don't have any mechanics liens, nobody can come back. Property conveys, seller's long gone. Mechanic puts a lien on the property. We got to ask questions. We got to ask the seller, what if they painted before I ever saw the house? Part of my listing appointment is, have you recently had work done? If you recently paid it, wow, it smells like fresh paint in here. I'm assuming this has been paid. I'm assuming this has been paid in full. You guys with me? We always got to be on the lookout. These red flags that we're going to talk more and more about. If you notice fresh paint, ask questions. If you notice nice new landscaping, ask questions. Seller signs an affidavit closing saying this can't happen. But what if? What if? What if? What if? This is why the buyer, the new owner at this point, has title insurance. Title insurance protects the new owner from errors of the past. So if the seller has work done and never pays, mechanic puts a lien on the property after closing, the buyer has title insurance to protect their interest. We'll talk more about title insurance in Unit 5. Title insurance, they're always going to go after the owner first, the former owner first, right? Because they're the ones that sign that affidavit saying that this can't happen. So if it does, title insurance is going to go after the seller. Be like, you lied to me, you owe me some money. What if the seller's dead? What if the seller ran off to Aruba and they're long gone? That's when title insurance is going to protect the new owner. Title insurance protects the current owner from errors of the past. Buyer's agents, when you're asking for repairs, on behalf of your buyer, again, we're going to talk about those repairs in just a bit, but if the seller agrees to do any repairs, one thing as the buyer's agent you can do is request paid in full invoices once the work is done. What a better way to protect your buyer than to see that paid in full stamp. You guys with me? Because now you're assured that those mechanics have been paid and you don't have this coming back up on the owner, the new owner, when they go to convey the property. Specific liens, that's exactly right. Specific liens are specific to the property, which is why they're coming after the new owner when they close, not the former owner. They're specific to the property. So any homeowner is encouraged to have titles insurance. If a lender's involved, title insurance is required, period, end of story. If it's a cash buyer, title insurance is highly recommended. Again, we'll get all into title insurance in Unit 5. But there are things we can do to help protect the buyer when they now own the property. Could you imagine going to closing, walking in the attorney's office, and the attorney says, oh yeah, you got a mechanics lien. It actually got, you didn't own the property, but for 3 or 4 days, and it got put up because it's specific. It attaches to the property. Questions on specific liens. A question came in, can I wait until 120 days to close and avoid any liens? That's probably not going to happen because now you're going to have to get both parties to delay closing. I mean, repairs could be complete days before closing. So I wouldn't think delaying closing would be the option. What can we do to protect? We can. That's why we have title insurance. Taxes are going to be before special assessments. Question came in about the superior liens. Which one would be first? Of the superior liens, taxes are going to go before special assessments. After that, they're all paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for mechanics liens. that are paid in the order in which the work began. I'm going to talk all about title insurance in Unit 5. Up to 120 days. That's right. They could do it on day 2 if they wanted to, but they have up to 120 days to file that lien. Examples of liens: deed of trust, mechanics liens, and the next category of liens that we're getting ready to talk about, commercial real estate broker lien. These are all specific liens. So specific liens attached to the property. Up next, we have general liens that attach to the person. Specific liens attached to the property, general liens attached to the person. General liens will also come up when you go to convey your property. If you're conveying property, you have to convey with all your debt paid off. And that's the whole purpose of recording liens. It's to protect your right to collect. So general liens attached to the person. A judgment is issued by a court. You owe the court money for whatever reason, they put a judgment on you. Personal property tax liens. Personal property taxes are taxes on the cars, the boat, the RV, the motorcycle, whatever. Personal property tax liens, failure to pay those taxes will create a general lien. Failure to pay your income taxes will create a state tax lien. Failure to pay the IRS will create a federal tax lien. All liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded. Superior liens are paid first. Everything else is paid in the order in which it's recorded, except for the mechanics lien. So again, think about it. You go to close, you go to sell your house, and you have, I don't know, 10 liens out there. You owe the lender, you owe the mechanic, you have a judgment, you have all these liens out there. All these people are standing in line with their hand out, waiting to get paid. What order are they standing in? That's this lien priority. There's a certain priority of who gets paid and when. And guys, here's the deal. When the money's gone, the money's gone. So the guys down at the very end of the line, if there's not a money left in the sale of the home to pay them, then they're out of luck. But at least by filing a lien, it gives them the right to stand in line. It gives them an opportunity to get paid. If you owe more than what the property's worth, now we're running into foreclosures, possibly short sale. We'll talk all about foreclosures and short sales in units 14 and 15. Questions on liens. When you see lien, what's the word you're going to think of? When you see lien, what's the word you're going to think of? Think about a loan. If you have a lien on your property, that's right. If you have a lien on your property, you owe somebody some money. How do they get paid and when? It depends on the lien priority. It depends on how they're standing in line, what order they're standing in line. Okay, just real quick, I'm going to, this homestead, I doubt very seriously you're going to have a test question on, but it's on the syllabus. So, you know, here we are, we're covering it. We mentioned that homestead back in unit 2. We said it was just a legal life estate. If you qualify for a homestead, you're protected from most creditors. You are not protected from general liens. You're not, excuse me, from judgment liens. So if you have a judgment on you, even if you have a homestead, you still owe that. That's what we say, protected from most creditors. You'll always owe taxes. You'll have to pay the lender. But the homestead could have that judgment on you. That's, I think, really, write this down. Don't worry about it again. Just say we talked about it. I'd be shocked if you guys called me and said I saw a test question on this. But I'm doing my job and covering it. So here we are. Okay. As we mentioned, now in the book on page 55, we're talking about that lien priority. Superior liens are real property taxes, government special assessments. All other liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for the mechanic's lien that's paid in the order in which the work began. Questions on liens? Another type of encumbrance. Remember, everything in Unit 3 is an encumbrance. A lien is a type of encumbrance. It encumbers the property. It affects the property and how you can convey it. Another type of encumbrance are our restrictive covenants. So again, we're going to talk more about restrictive covenants in Unit 6. But right now, we're just talking about them as an encumbrance. Restrictive covenants are pertinent. Who remembers what that big fancy word means? If something is impertinent, it does what? It runs with the land. See my little running man? That's what I'm doing, by the way. It runs with the land. So if you purchase a home with covenants, it's a private agreement. It's in public record. You deserve to know what you're buying. You deserve to know what those covenants are, what those restrictions are. Restrictive covenants are usually imposed and created by the developer. So the developer of that community or of that subdivision puts the covenants on the property. Even when they leave, even when the developers built their last house and they're gone, the restrictive covenants stay. Homeowners associations, things with restrictive covenants are usually enforced. They can either be enforced by property or managed by a property management company, or maybe by the owners. Maybe the owners of that community, everybody takes turn being president, vice president, treasurer, secretary. It's all in how the developer creates them. It's all in how the developer sets them up. And as we'll learn in Unit 6, the whole purpose of covenants is to maintain standards. Some people may not want to live next door to the person that has 10 cars on cinder blocks. If you don't want to live next door to that person, you might want to consider buying in a place with covenants that doesn't allow that. They're all different. They all have different rules. Some are more strict than others. Some will tell you what color you can have your front door. Some will tell you how high the grass in your front yard can be. Right? Some are more strict than others. Bottom line, if you don't like the covenants, don't buy a house in that community. It's pretty simple. Covenants do create a deed restriction. Yep. So we'll see this again in Unit 6. But right now, let's just understand that restrictive covenants are an encumbrance. They encumber the property. They affect the property. Another encumbrance is called lis pendens. Lis pendens is Latin. We've already learned French today. Now we're learning Latin. Lis pendens is Latin for pending litigation. There's notice on the property that there's a pending lawsuit. And we need to put it on notice. We need to let anybody that may be interested in buying the property know that it's in the throes of this lawsuit. Because at the end of this lawsuit, it may not be the seller's to sell. So it's putting notice out there to the public letting any interested buyer know, don't buy this property until after this lawsuit is over, until after we have settled this. Think of Liz Penn, it's a legal stop. Don't buy this property until we know what the result of this lawsuit is going to be. Another encumbrance is something called a writ of attachment. A writ of attachment is another legal stop. What are they warning you about this time? The court, there's a court order issued to seize the property. The court is taking the property. We got to protect buyers from shady sellers. Remember, I just said not all sellers are truthful. Sometimes they lie. Sometimes sellers may not notify, oh yeah, I got a court order on the property. The sheriff's getting ready to come get it. That's why we have this writ of attachment. Don't buy this. The court's getting ready to come seize this property. And guys, if the court's taking the property, the judge isn't going to show up on your front door and say, I'm taking this property. Who's the judge going to send to take care of it? They're going to send the sheriff. They're going to send the sheriff to do that work. So it's just another legal stop. Or the sheriff's deputy, right? The sheriff's, the judge is going to send the sheriff's going to call their deputy and say, yeah, go do this for me. Trickle down effect. Another type of encumbrance is an easement. You guys ever heard of an easement? I don't know a single property that doesn't have an easement. You guys like power? Do you like water? You probably have some kind of easement on your property from the water company, the electrical company. An easement is a non-possessory interest. You don't have ownership. You have permission to use the property. An easement is just permission to use the property of another. So if you like water, if you like electricity, you have to give the water company and the electric company permission to use your property to run their lines, run their cables. Well, you're not giving it to them, it's granted to them. Let's say it that way. So is this something we have to let the buyer know? This will come up on a survey. Easements will come up on a survey. We'll talk about surveys in Unit 4. But it's just kind of presumed that any property with electricity and water have an easement. I don't really like it when you guys assume that. That makes me nervous. But yeah, it could be that you have some kind of easement on the road. You get to maintain it. But they have that right. They have that permission to be there. There are two types of easements. The first type of easement is an appurtenant easement. What does appurtenant mean? It runs with the land. So what does an appurtenant easement do? It's an easement that runs with the land. An appurtenant easement is always and only 2 tracts of land. It only affects 2 properties that butt up to each other, side by side. It doesn't affect 3. It's always 2. And there are 2 parties, since there are 2 properties, there are 2 parties. One is the servient tenement, the other is the dominant tenement. One is doing the using, the other is being used. The dominant tenement is the one benefiting from the easement. They are the one doing the using. The servient tenement is the one being used. They are burdened by the easement. Typically, well, let me say typically. For example, why would we see this? Well, let's say, and y'all forgive me, I'm no Bob Ross, but let's say you have a tract of land and the road is here, right? So I got my road, tract of land. Okay, so you have a tract of land, you buy this land, and at some point in the future, you decide to subdivide this land. And you think that you're going to subdivide this land like this. And now I have what? Now I have 2 tracts of land. This would create an appurtenant easement. How does B get to their property? They have to go over A's lot. B would be the tenement. They're the one the dominant. They're the one doing the using. A is the one being used. A is a servient being used. Let's look at a picture. Your book on page 56. Lot A is being used. Lot B is doing the using. I don't know why B can't tear those trees down. Maybe they're protected. I don't know why, but this is the information that we have. This is the information that we have. How does B access their property? They have to drive over A's lot. An appurtenant easement affects both tracts of land. A and B would have to disclose that when they sell, when either one of them sell. It's appurtenant to both. So it's not like A can sell and then the new owner can come in and say, yeah, I'm not going to allow that. They can't do that because it is appurtenant. It runs with the land.
And Julie, there's no way to change that. Like you said, there's no way to change that if you're lot A.
Right. Once it's been granted, and again, I don't know why B just can't knock down some trees and put driveway in. I don't know about all that. But yeah, once it's been created, it's there. It's appurtenant. We'll talk. If I don't get to it today, we'll talk about it on Tuesday. Easements can terminate, they can end. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But as long as everything stays status quo, A and B sell, those easements are appurtenant. Those easements remain. How do we protect everybody's interest for an appurtenant easement? Well, we run down to the courthouse and record it. Again, I'm going to talk all about recordation in Unit 5. The whole reason we record is to protect someone's interest, to enforce someone's interests. So let's see, someone said they had this issue when they bought their property and you were made to put in a driveway. So you were, I mean, it sounds like you didn't really have a choice. You had to put in a driveway, which created an easement. And how is it enforceable? Because we run down, well, not we, but our attorney runs down to the courthouse and puts it on record. All about recording in Unit 5 next week. Another example of an appurtenant easement could be party wall. We talked about party walls earlier with townhomes. But you could also have a shared driveway. These guys got a lot going on, don't they? Not only are they sharing a driveway, but look at, they got a party wall in their garage too, right? So they got all sorts of things going on. Ooh, we got an easement lawsuit going on. Interesting. Karens are fun. So appurtenant easement is one type of easement. Another type of easement is called an easement in gross. Easement in gross benefits the people. It doesn't benefit the property. Appurtenant easement benefits the property. Easement in gross only benefits one person. An easement in gross Well, before I say that, remind me, how many tracts of land does an appurtenant easement affect? I can see your fingers. Yep. An appurtenant easement only always affects 2. An easement in gross could affect 1 tract of land. It could affect thousands of tracts of lands. Okay. Personal easement in gross, you're giving somebody permission to come on your property to do whatever. Maybe you have a pond and somebody wants to come fish in your pond. You could give them a personal easement in gross. You could give them permission. This doesn't run with the land. So when you sell your property, that person can no longer come on the pond, come and fish on your pond. I mean, they can, but now it's called trespassing, right? Because now they no longer have permission to be there. Commercial easement and gross, we probably see a lot more. Examples of commercial easement and gross: Duke Power Company, R&R Railroad. When you have multiple tracts of lands that have power poles, railroad ties, those are commercial easement and gross. They have permission, Duke has permission to put their power poles on your property. R&R Railroad has permission to run their train up and down the back of your lot. The picture on page 57, there's our power poles that run in the back of the lot. Y'all can't stop Duke from coming on your property and service their poles. Every once in a while, this comes up on the news. Somebody tries to complain or sue somebody because somebody with an easement, with a commercial easement, accessed their equipment, their property. If Duke were to sell, let's say Duke were to sell and Julie's Power Company purchases it. The commercial easement in gross is not automatically transferred. Julie's Power Company would have to acquire that commercial easement in gross. That would have to specifically be part of the deal. And if my attorney did a bad job and forgot to do that, then that commercial easement in gross goes away when Duke sells it. So that's what we mean by it terminates with the death of the easement owner. If we don't purposely transfer that right, then that easement dies when the property or the business conveys, when Duke sells it to me. So hopefully my attorney's doing a good job and make sure I get access to my brand new power poles. So again, a pertinent easement affects 2 and only 2 tracts of lands. Easement and gross could be 1, it could be thousands. My Winston-Salem people, you go up 311, head up towards, it's not Walkertown, it's Walnut Cove. Thank you, Walnut Cove. That whole stretch of 311, you're running parallel with the train track, right? That whole stretch driving up there, you're running parallel with the train track. That train track runs over, I don't know how many properties, however many are between Winston and up through Walnut Cove. That's an easement and gross. You cannot go out there on the tracks with a sign up that says, don't drive your train over my tracks. Please don't do that. They have permission to be there because of an easement and gross. Okay. So the bottom of page 57 over to 88, we talk about different ways that easements can be created. An easement can be express. We're going to see this a little bit more in Unit 9, but if there's an express agreement, something that's express means that it was stated clearly. Could be oral, could be in writing. But the terms, the conditions, it was stated clearly. An implied easement is created as a result of the actions. We didn't have a conversation about it. We didn't put it in writing. It just happened. It was implied. An example of an implied easement is something called an easement by necessity. Basically, what the easement by necessity says is that owners can't be landlocked. Owners can't be denied access onto or off of their property. So again, back to my little, did that work? I was hoping that worked. Back to my little picture, right? We had one tract of land. I'm not going to go through all that again. And then you have the road out front, and this person owned, and then they subdivided it. This would create an implied easement. You can't tell somebody, I'll sell you lot B, but you can't access it. You can't landlock somebody. You can't deny somebody from coming onto or off of their property. Easements can also be created by the operation of law. A judge can create an easement. And an example of an operation of law easement is something called an easement by prescription. If you're granted an easement through an easement by prescription, the judge is giving you that easement because you've been using the property for 20 years. North Carolina's 20 years. You've been using the property for 20 years and nobody's told you to stop. And now, 21 years later, the owner says, yeah, you can't use my property. Easement by prescription says the judge will grant them that. You've been doing it long enough anyway. When we get into unit 5, I think, we're going to take easement by prescription a step further. An easement is just possession. It's not ownership. It's just possession. We're going to take easement by prescription a step further and learn that there may be times where somebody could lose their property because somebody's been using it. The judge could order somebody's ownership. Not quite squatters. Maybe if they're there for 20 years, it's a long squatter, but possibly. So just keep in mind, easements are about possession. You have the right to be there. Oh, good. Nope, it's still not back on. So an easement is possession. Again, in unit 5, we're going to take easement by, it's not on. No, are you logged on twice by chance? Sometimes that happens too. So if you're logged on under your son, okay, will you please put your son's name in the chat so I make sure I give you the right permission, the right credit for being here today? Because I probably won't know who your son is. And I have to call Lane and I'll say, who's that? So easement by, thank you. Easement by prescription is possession. We get to unit 5, we'll take it a step further. Somebody can claim your property. They've been using it for 20 years. They can go to the judge and say, yeah, I've been using it for 20 years. I want it, it's mine. Isn't that crazy? We'll see that next week. Yep. And we'll talk about what kind of proof the judge needs to. They're not just going to give it to them, right? They're going to ask a series of questions. So we'll talk about that as well. So if easements can be created, they can also be terminated. The end of class exam is online. The state exam is online or in person, your choice. We will talk about that later. So how do easements end? Well, if the purpose for which the easement was created no longer exists, then there's no reason to have an easement. Let's say, for example, a timber company, you give a timber company easement to come timber the woods, the forest on your property. When those trees are gone, that timber company no longer has a reason to come on your property, right? That purpose that the easement was created stops existing. Once they get all those trees, once the trees are removed, the timber is removed, that timber company no longer has reason to be there. Merger of parcels, there we go, merger of parcels. Remember the tract of land? And we divided it into two. A and B owned it. What if B buys A or A buys B, whichever? Once you've merged the parcels and now there's only one owner, there's no reason for an easement. B now owns the whole property. So we merge those parcels. If you release the right of an easement through the courts, we do something called a quit claim deed. Again, we'll talk about deeds in Unit 5. Or if you abandon, if you just stop using the property, you abandon it. If you go to a judge to terminate an easement due to abandonment, the judge is going to, intent of the parties is what the judge is going to ask. Why did you intend to use this easement? How long did you intend to use it? Et cetera, et cetera. Questions on easements? It's permission to be there. It's not ownership. It's permission to be there. It's permission to use somebody else's land. So I kind of told you guys a little fib. Don't hate me. When we started Unit 3, I said everything we talk about in Unit 3 is an encumbrance. Well, that's not entirely accurate. There's one teeny tiny thing in Unit 3 that's not an encumbrance, and that's something called a license. A license is very similar to a personal easement. Remember we talked about our easement and gross and our personal easement. It's still the privilege to enter somebody's land. It may or may not be recorded. It ends with the sale of the property. The difference is one is an encumbrance, one is not. Question came in. I'm thinking you're asking about an easement. Can you take ownership of an easement? Sure, you can buy the part, you can merge the parcels, purchase the other parcel. Fishing on my pond. Example of a license. Which one would I use? A license or a personal easement? One's an encumbrance and one's not. Probably depends on how well I know you, right? If you're my buddy, that would be different than if you're a complete stranger. I probably want something more official if you're a complete stranger. Oh, if the property's been abandoned, can you take ownership? Sure, anything's possible. Maybe a status sale or something. My homeowner's on the call, for example. Are you getting phone calls and postcards in the mail regularly where people want to buy your house? It's kind of the market we're in right now, right? Somebody wants to buy your house. They're looking at the tax record. They're looking on, excuse me, at the register of deeds. They're pulling deeds. They're looking at owner records. That's how they're finding you. It's public record. Ownership is public record. I mean, money talks. I hear you, scam calls, but yeah, you can buy my house. What's it worth to you? Anything I got's for sale, as long as the price is right. What's a good husband worth to you? No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't sell him most days. Okay. Another type of encumbrance, still talking about encumbrance except for license. Another type of encumbrance is something called an encroachment. Encroachments are bad. Encroachments are very bad. When you see the word encroachment, see the word roach. Do we like roaches? Typically not. Encroachments are bad. With an encroachment, an improvement on your property extends onto somebody else's, into your neighbor's property. Your improvement is on your neighbor's property. Why don't you guys tell us in the chat what you think some examples of some encroachments can be? What is an improvement? That's the number one right there. Boom, out the gate. The fence is probably the number one encroachment. Trees, absolutely. Driveway, shed, the deck, playground. Hence the easement lawsuit. The well, possibly the well if it's on a well water, tree house. The fence, and all these are really good examples. I'm going to say the fence is probably the biggest, the more common example that we deal with, the more common encroachment that we deal with. Guys, the only thing you know by looking at a fence is that somebody put a fence there. The fence does not tell you that's the property line. I wish I could tell you that anybody, before they put a fence up, had a survey done to make sure that they put the fence within their property lines. I wish I could tell you that, but I try not to lie to you guys. So the truth is, sometimes people say, oh, I'm going to save money and not have a survey done, and I'm just going to put a fence up. And that fence extends onto somebody else's property line, and boom, you got an encroachment. And the problem with encroachments is it affects both titles. It affects yours and it affects your neighbors. Encroachments can get ugly. The only way to determine that we have an encroachment is to have a survey done. And we're going to talk all about surveys in Unit 4. My husband's coworker, this just blows my mind. And we're going to end here today, but give me just a minute. My husband's coworker came to work probably about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. It was around Thanksgiving. And they said that their neighbor put a fence up and then had the survey done. Kind of a little backwards, huh? They put the fence up, then they had the survey done. Lo and behold, the fence was on his coworker's land. You know what the guy did? The guy came and knocked on my husband's coworker's door and said, yeah, my fence is on your property. You need to pay to have that taken down. Isn't that a big hunk of junk? They're in the throes of a legal battle. It's ugly, it's nasty. And I tell you guys what the unfortunate thing about all this is the kids used to play together. The wives used to be friends. And now all that is over because they put the fence up and then they had the survey done and discovered, yeah, exactly. They put their cart before their horse. Why did they do what they do? I have no idea. Again, the only thing you can tell by looking at a shed is that somebody put a shed there. Never, ever, ever use sheds, fences, any kind of man-made improvement to determine what the property line is. I can't tell you how many times I've been standing in a backyard with a buyer, with a potential buyer, and I've talked to them about getting a survey done. Oh, Julie, I don't need a survey. Julie, do you see that fence right there? That's going to be my property line. I know what you're thinking, but the truth is that's not always the case. The only way to determine if we have an encroachment is to have a survey done. Somebody said that's why you should know your property lines. How do you know your property lines? You have a survey done. It's absolutely best to have a survey done before you purchase. Again, we'll talk about this in Unit 4. If a title's unmarketable, it means it affects the title. How do we clear up an encroachment? If the title's unmarketable, how do we fix this? There's only 2 ways we can do this. We either tear the fence down or we create an easement. That's the only way you're going to make both titles marketable. Either take the fence down or the encroachment down, or you create an easement. How can you protect yourself from your neighbors? Well, not much you can do about your neighbors, right? But having a survey tells you. Survey is not always listed when selling. Buyers are encouraged to get their own. We'll talk about that. Yep. Tim's asking about adverse possession. We'll talk about that in Unit 5. That's taken easement by prescription a step further. So we'll see that in Unit 5 next week. Okay, 12:59. I got 1 more minute. I'm going to stop here. Everybody, I want you guys to have a good weekend. I also want you to start studying. I want you to start now. Commit now. We've already been through 2.5 units. We keep going. Next week, we're going to finish Unit 3. We're going to do Unit 4. We're going to do Unit 5. We'll possibly even get to Unit 6. So keep up with your tentative schedule. Please make sure you look ahead. If I can help in any way over this weekend, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Fair enough? Okay, I feel like I haven't breathed in the last hour. So, all right. So you guys have a great weekend. I will see everybody at 9 a.m. sharp on Tuesday.